Updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you. Bulletins on GB News,
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
From cold mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis in the car,
in the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again
to start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
A really important thing about GB News, and it's brought something completely different to the landscape.
The mainstream is all about keeping the status quo as it is, ticking along quite nicely. They don't want to ask difficult questions.
GB News exists because there is a desperate need for fearless journalism that puts the people first.
GB News came on the scene as a disruptor, and it has always been a disruptor ever since.
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now.
Well, the reality is that most British journalists are afraid.
That's not GB News.
Journalism is journalism at the end of the day, and we're not here to serve any masters. Our masters are our audience.
We're here to talk about things in a way that have never been broadcast on British airways before.
Do not miss a moment on GB News.
The #1 news channel in the country.
Good morning, Britain. Good evening, America. We are live from London. This is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America.
We'll see what happens. Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win.
Trump declares victory, but as a fragile ceasefire remains, Vice President Vance is dispatched to Pakistan for crunch talks to bring it to a permanent end. Also,
between 2021 and 2024, we saw over 2.6 million more people enter this country than leave it.
this is extraordinary. Thousands of Asian, African and Middle Eastern migrants have entered the UK under the Ukrainian free visa scheme. And
now they're looking to essentially just do a lease and sell it, and I'm against that. You know, it's a reasonably nothing like Greenland, but it's a reasonably important area of the globe.
Chagos catastrophe, for Starmer at least. Mauritius has vowed to take over the Chagos Islands after the Prime Minister was forced to shelve the deal. And breaking tonight, the United Nations is reviewing whether the deal breaches human rights laws, as the government is accused of ethnic cleansing. Plus,
I have nothing against with the Muslim civilization. I think it's a great achievement of the human being, and definitely they have their own place. And this place is definitely not Hungary.
The bane of Brussels, Hungary is just hours away from one of the most important elections, which could reshape the future of Europe. Elsewhere.
How are you feeling? Confident?
Good luck, sir!
My heart bleeds for him. Royal distress. Prince Harry is being sued, and tonight has been revealed that the late Queen feared the Duke and Duchess of Montecito were secretly recording her. And
many people find President Trump's actions to be an anathema. They find his words unstatesmanlike, his treatment of allies needlessly provocative.
An unstatesmanlike president. Is Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch right? Are we now living in a new Trumpian age where anything goes? I'm Will Kingston, and this is The Late Show Live. I will get that walk to the table right one day. Welcome to The Late Show Live. Joining me this evening in London is my panel of former Conservative advisor Charlie Rowley and also political commentator and broadcaster Matthew Studland. And in Washington is political commentator Hilary Fordwich and Democratic strategist back on the show, Mally Smith. Thank you for joining us tonight, one and all. Let's move on to our main news this evening, and it's been an incredibly tense day of talks in Islamabad as Vice President JD Vance met with Iranian negotiators to try and bring an end to the Iran war. Pakistan officials say talks have been largely positive, but that a stalemate persists over control of the Strait of Hormuz, with Iranian state media calling America's demands excessive and unacceptable. And while the Vice President might have been trying to bring an end to them through diplomatic channels, the President has taken a more forthright and brash approach.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of reports. They've been meeting for many hours, as you probably have noticed. We'll see what happens. Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win. We totally defeated that country. And so let's see what happens. Maybe they make a deal, maybe they don't. Doesn't matter. From the standpoint of America, we win. One of the things that's happening is that boats are sailing up and heading out to our country with big, beautiful tankers, and we're loading them up with oil and gas and everything else. And it's a pretty beautiful thing to see.
I think some members of my panel may disagree with that. Tonight, Pope Leo has also intervened, announcing the delusion of omnipotence and demanding that political leaders stop and negotiate peace. Let's start, gentlemen. Charlie, I'll go to you first. Donald Trump is confident, as always. He doesn't actually care if a deal is reached or not because they've won. At the same time, whilst you can make an argument that militarily, perhaps, their goals have been achieved, there are certainly geopolitical considerations which are still very, very messy.
Definitely, yes, because the Strait of Hormuz is still in doubt as to who is running it, whether Iran are going to charge tolling for it, whether actually the flow of those goods that need to come through to get oil prices down, not just in the UK, but across multiple regions, all of that hangs still in the balance on the back of what the discussions are. Donald Trump has got to come out and say that he's won, whatever. That will be his style. But you know, everybody just hopes that those talks actually can result in a deal, in a resolution. However that looks, I have absolutely no idea, because I think the goalposts have changed so much throughout the 6 weeks that we've been talking about it, and what the goals of the US have been, apart from destabilising Iran, or the Iran regime's brutal ability to commit the crimes that it does, funding international terrorism, having the ability to enrich its uranium, to develop a nuclear weapon. All of that seems to have been obliterated. That's on the one hand, but where do the Iranian people now sit, the ones that wanted intervention in the first place? Yes. Can they come out or come forward on the back of this? We've just got to see how the talks end.
Yes, Matthew, I'll follow up from what Charlie said there. How confident are you that there will be a deal in this 2-week negotiation period?
It's incredibly difficult to tell. I mean, the President of the United States is just talking nonsense. I mean, you might as well put a Blue Peter presenter in charge of the most powerful country in the world. Every time he opens his mouth, one's own jaw drops. And we may have become used to this, but it doesn't help the world, doesn't help our fuel prices, it doesn't help the American people, it hasn't helped the Iranian people. But at least if you're going to go to war with Iran, one might have hoped that something would have changed, and it hasn't changed. The Iranian people are still suffering at the hands of this brutal, wicked regime. The Strait of Hormuz, having been closed, has caused utter chaos to the global economy and is threatening, well, it's already raised our fuel prices and is threatening our energy prices further down the line. So it's just a total mess at the moment.
Let's get the thoughts of my panel in Washington, political commentator Hilary Fordwich and Democratic strategist Mally Smith. Mally, I'll go to you first. You just heard Matthew Studland say that effectively the communications around this is a mess, and he doesn't have any confidence really that they'll be able to get to a satisfactory outcome for the United States. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, I agree broadly with him. Politically, this has been a disaster for President Trump. We've seen his polling go lower because of it. So, yes, he's got to do what he can to try to frame this as a win, even though that's a difficult proposition for him. Look, I think from these negotiations right now, the two sides need to show some progress, and we're not going to get some sort of master deal from this that where we remove the enriched uranium and the strait's fully open and we kind of magically get everything we want. I think the U.S. needs to see movement from Iran when it comes to opening the strait. And then I think on the Iranian side, what they're hoping for is Israel to let up on the bombing in Lebanon. I think that's probably the outlines of something that could be moved forward, and then they would probably punt some of those larger questions about Iran's nuclear program. I think the key there, though, can the U.S. Get Israel to pull back there, and then if that happens, I think Iran might let us use the strait again.
Well, Hillary, I'll throw that to you. To what extent do you think the US can encourage Israel to fall in line? To use J.D. Vance's phrase the other day, just to ease off a bit to enable this negotiation to actually work.
Well, I sure hope so, Will. Pleasure to be back with you again. And I agree with the last two parts of what Mally said. Shocking to agree with Mally, actually. But the first part of what he said, I actually don't agree with all due respect, Mally. And that is that Donald Trump, before he was ever president, back from 1980, he's always had a true North Star. He then was totally and utterly disgusted with our hostages being taken. He's the one that said for all those years, decades, he's been saying that Iran is a threat to us, they're militarily a threat to us, that what they've done with oil, how they've held the world hostage, and how we were in danger, and how eventually there would be a war. I think he's got a true North Star. Obviously, there's been some confusion in communication, but ultimately, there needs to be concessions on both sides. The Iranians will only capitulate if we do actually let these existing leaders have a degree of their way, because they have to save face, and they still, of course, want to be in power like any leader. So we have to let them save face, then they'll capitulate a bit, and yes, we must persuade Israel to stop what's happening in Lebanon, but obviously the Iranians basically have now admitted, obviously, they were backing that. But I think both sides have to concede somewhat. That's the only way you'll get any deal done.
Well, Hillary, a quick follow-up there. I understand that North Star that Donald Trump has had for a long time. I've seen the clips of him talking about Iran in the 1980s, talking about taking Chagos Islands, talking about getting rid of the mullahs. Is there the fact of the matter is, I think that North Star initially was changing the regime and also having a greater control over Iranian oil. It doesn't look like that North Star is actually going to be achieved here.
Well, actually, though, Will, we might actually have the North Star achieved by the fact that we may have more American oil going around the world. Don't forget, he's already declared that there are so many just tankers, empty tankers, that are heading to the U.S. to take American oil. So actually, I think the U.S. will play a greater role in terms of oil supply globally. And certainly, obviously, with all those leaders that were obliterated, we have taken out a lot of that disastrous regime. And I think the 45,000 people that lost their lives probably are the families are very, very glad that President Trump has stepped in to try and make a change in a country where people have been just thwarted and really just treated abominably for so many decades. I think there are many people that are actually grateful to him.
Well, we will proceed with those strategic implications a bit later on, but thank you very much for your time, guys. With me now is research professor at the US Army War College, Azim Ibrahim. Azim, lovely to have you on the show. What did you make of Donald Trump's comments today, particularly when he said, I don't really care whether or not a deal is made?
Yeah, so one of the challenges, Will, that we have is that it's not exactly clear what the US was actually trying to achieve. When this conflict first started, the US said that they're trying to get rid of Iran's nuclear weapons. Then they moved on to regime change. Then it's mentioned the ballistic missiles. And now it seems that the goal is to open the Strait of Hormuz, which was never an issue before the conflict actually started. And the talks that are going on at the moment in Islamabad are totally unprecedented. This is the highest level meeting between a senior US official and the Iranians since 1979, which actually indicates the desperation of the Americans. I think they've realized that they don't hold many cards. The Iranians are essentially now in control of the escalation, and the United States has lost control of the escalation ladder. The Strait, I would imagine, is probably not going to open anytime soon unless without the Iranians charging tolls. And, the world is paying the price for this, and almost every country around the world is going to be blaming the United States. And this also diminishes the US global geopolitical influence, because you now have a situation in which countries are negotiating directly with the Iranians for the tankers to be released and allowed through the Strait. And it's not true that the Strait is closed. Chinese ships are still getting through. Ships that can pay, that can negotiate, Iranian allies are all getting are all getting through. So Iran essentially now controls the keys to the global energy economy, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
Well, I've heard pushback from some conservative commentators on the show over the past week that have basically said, well, you know what, America is energy independent, give or take. As a result of that, it's not really our problem. It is a problem for Europe, perhaps. It's perhaps a problem for the United Kingdom, but Donald Trump will not be judged on the Strait of Hormuz. How do you think that stacks up as a political assessment?
And that's totally true. The United States is the largest oil producer in the world, so they're largely immunized from this. But like I said, most allies are in the world. There's countries that are completely dependent on that strait to get their energy supplies. And very soon they're going to be feeling the pinch, and they're only going to be blaming the United States for this, which diminishes the US global influence. And like I said, they will be negotiating with the Iranians directly, and that just further diminishes the US as a global superpower. So, and that's just the reality of it. And I don't see the Iranians giving up any of that control anytime soon.
You used the word blame there. Donald Trump, in his own inimitable way, said if these negotiations are successful, he will take full credit. If they're not, he will blame JD Vance. I dare say he was only half joking there. This is an incredibly difficult assignment for JD Vance, who I don't think, in his heart of hearts, really is supportive of this war. How do you think this could potentially play for him as he eyes off a 2028 presidential run?
Yes, and also remember, JD Vance does not have the experience of these kinds of negotiations. He's never been in them before. I think he's come into this realising that, they have a very weak hand to play in Pakistan at the moment. And if he manages to pull this off one way or another and they spin it as a win, this will obviously go down very well for JD and his future political trajectory. But it's still far too early to say. But if I had to guess in any way, well, I would say that what will emerge from this will put the Iranians in a much stronger position, than it would the Americans. And the biggest losers out of all of this, in fact, would be the Israelis, who really need to keep this going. They cannot continue this conflict without American support. They simply don't have the industrial military base to continue this. And I would say that the biggest winners out of all of this is actually the Pakistanis. This was a country that was on the brink of economic collapse, and now they have managed to, increase their diplomatic footprint around the globe and win over the Muslim world and the United States as this global peace broker. So the Pakistanis have emerged out of this surprisingly very well.
We literally have just got a message from the White House. Negotiations have been going for 15 hours now, and they are continuing. So we will keep everyone updated as we hear more from the White House on these negotiations, but they remain ongoing as we speak. Azim Ibrahim, thank you so much for your time. Let me know your thoughts, ladies and gentlemen, by visiting gbnews.com/yoursay. We will be reading them out over the course of the next 2.5 hours. Thank you very much for joining us on the People's Channel, GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis, in the car,
in the kitchen,
GB News Breakfast is there.
With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again to start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I have nothing against with the Muslim civilization. I think it's a great achievement of the human being, and definitely they have their own place, and this place is definitely not Hungary.
Very conciliatory there from Viktor Orban. Welcome back to The Late Show Live. Hungary is just hours away from one of the most important elections in recent times, which could reshape the future of Europe. All down to that one man, Viktor Orban. We'll be discussing that shortly. But first, breaking tonight, the United Nations is reviewing where Sir Keir Starmer's Chagos surrender breaches international human rights laws. There they are once again rearing their ugly head. Officials are assessing allegations that the Prime Minister is committing ethnic cleansing and potential crimes against humanity for attempting to evict native Chagosians from the archipelago as part of his plans to cede the British territory to Mauritius. That follows Mauritius pledging to reclaim control of the Chagos Islands after the UK was forced to shelve the deal. And just as a reminder, this is the reasoning that Sir Keir Starmer gave for the deal in the first place.
This is absolutely vital for our defence and intelligence, and therefore for the safety and security of the British people. The strategic location of this base is of the utmost significance to Britain. And if Mauritius took us to court again, which they certainly would have, the UK's long-standing legal view is that we would not have a realistic prospect of success.
We are run by lawyers. Joining me in London is my panel of former Conservative advisor, Charlie Rowley, and political commentator, Matthew Stadlin. Matthew, I'll start with you. Whether or not they can reach the bar of crimes against humanity, I'm not so sure. But the interesting thing about the Chagos deal is that the party of self-determination, the party of the oppressed minority, haven't taken into account the views of Chagosians as they've gone through this process. That's a bit odd, isn't it?
Well, I didn't see this story coming, I must admit. It's a serious story, but if it weren't serious, it would be almost comical. Listen,
the whole saga is comical in many ways.
It was wrong for us as a country to expel Chagosians however many decades ago it is now. That was wrong. But this is a problem for Nigel Farage and for Kemi Badenoch because they have professed to be extremely worried about the national security implications. You're smiling already, Charlie. About the national security implications of handing over ownership to Mauritius. But if these 4 Chagosians, I think it's 4 Chagosians who are looking for help from the United Nations on this issue, if they were to succeed, and if Britain were forced to hand over the Chagos Islands to the Chagosians, and by the way, as I understand it, different Chagosians think different things about the ownership and what should be done. But if these Chagosians were to be successful, if we had to hand over the Chagosian Islands to the Chagosians, even if these particular Chagosians say you can keep the base, that creates years and decades of uncertainty over a base that we all agree is strategically so vital. So
sorry, just quickly, my understanding is really they are just hoping to retain the status quo and British control over the islands. I think they're not really hoping that they will get to a level of self-determination.
That's very possible. We'd have to look at the detail of it. But in principle, if Nigel Farage and whoever else is saying that Chagosians have a right to be there, well, if you follow that logic through, and we were forced to hand over the islands to Chagosians, and I agree, I don't think that a tiny number of people can sustain a nationhood, but if we had to do that, that's not going to be in our interest from a national security point of view.
Charlie, you're right to reply.
Well, this is not a problem for Kemi and Nigel. That's what tickled my fancy. This is a problem for the Prime Minister. This is the 17th, 18th, 19th U-turn. I've lost count.
It's a surrender on a surrender.
It's the idea that it's absolutely vital, you heard the Prime Minister say there, that it was of the utmost importance that we be sued by the Mauritians. Oh, I'm creaking in my boots. This was a piece of land, territory that we were going to hand over and lease back at the pretty penny of £35 billion without any real say over
That's the Tory number.
Because,
I think the government's number is £3 billion.
No doubt the other side. Well,
£3 billion too many is the point.
£3 billion would be nice to save as well, if you look at the welfare bill, for example. But this is a headache for the Prime Minister. It's been a complete.
But Charlie, call it a U-turn. It's just not fair. I'd go as far as to say it's potentially intellectually dishonest to suggest that this is a U-turn by Starmer. Starmer has been forced into this,
and rightly so,
by Trump. That's not a U-turn. If you're forced to change direction by the President of the United States, that's not a U-turn. The person who's U-turned on it and flip-flopped is Donald Trump. He has changed his mind repeatedly. It was fine last year. It was fine. We were told it was fine, and then he changed his mind because he had a fit of pique over Greenland. You know that's the truth.
I think there is also an element that he actually didn't really know what was going on in the Chagos Islands and started speaking about, which is also not a good thing. But the other thing here is, ironically, I actually think there is a very easy get out for Keir Starmer, which is tell the UN to basically go jump in a lake. And because there is no real enforcement mechanism for whatever it is that they want to hold against the United Kingdom, there is not going to be any consequences. But unfortunately, Keir Starmer doesn't buy into that. The only thing he does believe in is international human rights law.
Well, that's exactly, which makes it even more fascinating, because the UN is sort of suggesting, as my understanding is, that actually if the deal had gone through, that would have been...
the idea of Keir Starmer being found guilty of ethnic cleansing, I mean...
well, exactly, which is why you should never have gone forward with the deal.
No, Charlie, he went forward for the same reason the Tories were progressing this. They went forward because he thought it was in our interest.
I need to bring in my Washington panel here, Hilary Fordwich and Mally Smith. Hilary, I will go to you. How seriously do you think that Keir Starmer is taking these potential claims or a case of ethnic cleansing and genocide?
Well, one would hope that he'd actually take it very seriously, Will. Why? Because he's an international lawyer, isn't he? He's all about human rights. And I'm with Nigel Farage, who said it's so ironic that now it might be the international courts of human rights that might scupper this ridiculous deal. So I'm assuming he's going to take their consideration and their ruling and their investigation extremely seriously. And I think this is one of the most humiliating areas for him, because it was supposed to be his expertise. And as we know, he wants a platform on the global stage. This is globally humiliating. And to have President Trump call this absolutely a ludicrous deal, in different words, to say how stupid this deal was, basically, I think that's really damning. And I think he'll go down, that people will remember for certain things. I think he will go down in British memory as, ironically, the international human rights lawyer that managed to botch his own deal.
Yeah, it is amazing how frequently we hear on social media from the Labor Party and Keir Starmer, we are acting in the national interest, which I would have thought should actually go without saying. So they must be being slaughtered in focus groups by people saying that they are not putting the British people first. Mally, to you, what have you heard behind the scenes in Washington around how this deal is perceived both in the White House and amongst the defence establishment?
Well, my understanding is that President Trump
didn't have really a strong opinion on it, and we've kind of seen that in his statements and his administration statements. For a while, it seemed whoever he talked to last, whether it was Keir Starmer telling him why this deal made sense, or it was someone in the opposition telling him why it didn't make sense, or someone in his administration saying why they thought the deal was good or bad, he would parrot what he heard previously. I think the problem for Starmer is that his recent issues he's had with President Trump in regards to President Trump perceiving him as not doing enough in the Iran war is now going to affect the Chagos deal, because President Trump isn't going to compartmentalize these things, especially because he might say he has strong feelings on it. I will tell you, I feel pretty confident that Trump does not really care about this issue. What he cares about is probably getting even with the Keir Starmer he's angry at. So I would hope, if you're Keir Starmer, you don't ask him about it, or people don't talk to him about it until there's a better phase in their relationship, because he's not going to get a good answer from him.
Well, and I think he did care, though. Sorry, but to add, I just do think President Trump does care about being able to launch from bases that are jointly ours, and that was something that Keir Starmer thwarted. So that note means that he very much cared on that particular note.
Yeah, well, of course, there was that notorious press conference where he said, why is the UK doing this? Do they need the money or something? And everyone in the UK was saying, Donald, mate, we are paying people in order to give away these islands in the worst deal in the history of deal making. Mally, Hillary, thank you very much for your time. A spokesperson from the Foreign Office previously told GB News, we have always been clear that if a long-term deal was not reached, there was a risk of further litigation being brought rapidly, which would have had serious implications for base operations. Instead, the government acted decisively to address threats to the base's operations, to protect national security interests and safeguard our shared defence capabilities. Still ahead on The Late Show Live.
Many people find President Trump's actions to be an anathema. They find his words unstatesmanlike, his treatment of allies needlessly provocative.
Is Kemi Badenoch right? Is Donald Trump acting in an unstatesmanlike manner to his supposed allies? And why are we in a new era of Trumpism? But first tonight, it's a major royal rumble tonight. Prince William could be about to ban his brother Harry from the coronation. Should he? This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you. Bulletins on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every week there are stories that shape the national conversation.
We'll be discussing that.
And on Saturday Morning Live, we break them down.
Is that true? This is fascinating, isn't it?
The politics, the headlines, the debates everyone's talking about.
And the questions that you want answered.
Do you think that was a legitimate attack for him to make?
What led you to set up this fantastic movement?
You know what? It's a great question, Olivia.
So what are you waiting for?
Your weekend starts here. Saturdays at 10 a.m, only on GB News.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show live from the GB News studios in London. I'm Will Kingston. Breaking tonight, Prince William is reportedly set to ban his brother and the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, from attending his coronation when he becomes king. The bombshell claim has been made by renowned royal biographer Tom Bower in his new book. The claim also coincides at a time of trouble for the Duke, who is facing legal action from Centre Bail, a charity he co-founded, after a dispute that reportedly led to reputational damage and internal disruption. He denies those claims. And in further breaking news tonight, The Telegraph has claimed that the late Queen Elizabeth feared the Duke and Duchess were recording private conversations for a potential Netflix project. Claims that would be denied by the couple, I might add. With me now is Editor-at-Large of The Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths. Charlotte, always a pleasure to see you. How much substance is there behind these rumours that William, when the time comes, will not allow Harry to be a part of the coronation proceedings?
Well, Tom Bower's sources are impeccable, but Prince Harry has said he thinks Tom Bower is fixated on him and hasn't got good sources. However, I think the Express today was hinting that one of the sources was Lord Fellows. It's a bit unclear, but it mentions Lord Fellows, who's that was the husband of Lady Jane Fellows, who's Prince Harry's really close to. It was Diana Spencer's sister. So I think that the Express is alluding to that being part of the claim and says it is from a member of the extended family. So I think the sources are good. And also, I just think it is likely, it's very likely, William is going to exclude his brother from his coronation. I think it's very interesting that stories like this are starting to pop up. It kind of indicates that a coronation might happen in the medium to near future. And there was a time not so long ago where we would never speak of William's coronation because it was supposed to be this thing that was happening in the distant future and we weren't supposed to speculate about Charles's health and cancer battle. But anyway, it's in the public domain now. People are starting to speculate about what it will be like when William's king. And I think the first thing he will do is exclude his brother from the line of succession, probably take away his titles, and from the actual day of the coronation itself.
Do you think that's driven by spite? Is William at the stage now where you could say that he genuinely, and I don't know whether this is too strong a word, but hates his brother?
I don't think it's too strong a word. And I think it is driven by spite, but also by fear. And it was interesting you mentioned the Telegraph article, because there's long been speculation online that in previous ceremonies to do when the Queen was alive, royal ceremonies, that Harry and Meghan were perhaps recording. And there is this clip that's going round and round virally of Harry seeming to fiddle with the lapel on his jacket at a royal event, and much speculation that he was recording for Oprah. Now, we'll never know if that's true or not, but there may be an element of fear from William, and he would be right to worry that, you know, anything that Harry is invited to could, if not be recorded, documented by him verbally, either in a book or in another Oprah interview or in any kind of reality series. You know, we know he's done his Netflix series with Meghan in the past. And quite apart from that, I just think him being there in the congregation of any kind of service, royal service, would just create such an amount of tension among the rest of the royal family, especially if Meghan were to be present, that it's almost not worth having him there at all.
Well, at the same time, if you put that in as one argument, there would also be a huge controversy if he was to make this decision. It would be, you know, in many respects, the story of the coronation. It may even overshadow it. Surely that would be taken into account in the calculus that he is trying to think through.
I think you're right. It could overshadow it. But if he were to leak it out long in advance, say to sources who might speak to Tom Bowers' book several years in advance of the coronation, then the public gets an idea that Harry's not going to be there, and maybe the publicity flares up long ahead of the actual event itself. I think what Charles did was quite clever. Was he did invite Harry, Meghan didn't go, Harry slipped in. I think he went to Heathrow moments after the coronation ended and back to LA, and he just slipped in and slipped out. I don't know whether that was Charles encouraging Harry to do that and make the trip as subtle and as fleeting as possible. And then you have that good balance of him being there but not making a big show of himself. Certainly no balcony moment where they appear on the balcony. The other thing is, I think William's coronation itself will be quite stripped back, because I think William's monarchy will be stripped back and pared back and just quite minimal and quite modern. So he might find some way around it by saying, well, I'm only having immediate family or working royals, and he can go around it that way.
And how realistic are Harry and Meghan about a chance of reconciliation? I would have thought that there is no way in a million years that anyone in the royal family could trust what either they say, or that any sort of conversations won't eventually leak out. Do they think in their minds that there is a chance one day they can return to the fold?
I think Harry does. I don't think Meghan does. I think Meghan's realistic about it, which is, I suppose, why she probably didn't come over to Charles's coronation. I think there was a time last summer when Harry, there was a chance actually. Harry was quite optimistic, and of course he flew over in September to meet his father. There was that famous meeting which I revealed last July on the balcony between his aides and the King's aides, and it was all looking quite positive. But then the recent leaks about his security in the last month or so, I think have done huge damage to relations with the royal family. And what he's aiming for is next summer, 2027, with the Invictus Games in Birmingham, to be reconciled with his father. And I just think that's too soon. I don't think it's going to happen by then.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Charlotte Griffiths, thank you so much for your time. Charlie, your opportunity to tee off on Harry if you so wish.
Well, look, I don't want to be... I've got lots of views about it, but I don't want to be too hard on him. I just think he is a lost boy, and he is a boy. He's treated his family like a kid that's obviously a spoiled brat. He's not grasped the facts of anything. We see that in the court documents that Charlotte, your last guest, will know all too well about, where Prince Harry said that he had absolutely no communication with a particular journalist, and that was plain to see in the court papers. He went on to do a big interview with the BBC to say how he had all his security details stripped away from him, and how all former chancellors and former foreign secretaries, they all still got their police protection, which they don't. He doesn't grasp the facts. He is someone that is clearly looking through a victim complex mode. Obviously, he's had a lot of issues with his own family, I get that, but he's then been a complete sellout to them. So there's no surprise. You know, he has to reconcile, but he has to do it with a compromise where everyone can get involved in.
Matthew, a quick answer from you. Would this be the right decision to ban Harry from the coronation?
No, the whole thing of talking about what would happen after the King's death, I think, is unseemly. But we are where we are. My view is it would be a terrible decision to exclude Harry. You know, I'm a big fan of yours, Charlie, but I find it extraordinary to describe Harry as a boy. This is a man who is not only a husband and a father, but put his life on the line in Afghanistan for our country, and has done enormous things for our brave British veterans. This is a very serious figure who I think has made some mistakes, but he needs to be treated with respect. The two brothers should sort it out, because it is such a terrible role model that when families break up, it's seriously, it's a real tragedy. These guys should both do better.
Very quick round of reply.
You talk about the things that he's done for this country, and I don't take that away from him, but what has he also done for the country? Written a book called Spare, which threw the monarchy, the head of state, under the bus, that's done an Oprah interview that sold out to Netflix, that has now been accused of recording the late Queen's conversations. This is a boy. He's had merit in the past, but he's completely undermined.
Boys don't put their lives on the line for the country. You can make mistakes, but to call him a boy is just unserious.
He's acting like a boy.
This is the tragedy, is that his actions in recent years have actually overshadowed much of the wonderful things that he did do for this country.
Well, there's a huge breakdown of trust. Hang on. This is
one second. I need to bring in our Washington team, Hillary and Mally. Hillary, I suspect you'll have stronger opinions on this than Mally will. What do you make of it?
Oh, actually, you know us both very well, don't you? Actually, I have very strong opinions. I do agree with what Matthew did say. He did put his life on the line. He did serve his country. I think he did wonderful things at one juncture. And remember, Second only to the Queen, he was the most popular royal at one juncture. However, I totally agree with what Charlie said. He has infantile behavior right now. He has behaved like a spoilt boy. And I will tell you that a very, very dear friend of mine was extremely close to the family when the boys were growing up. And he has always said, and I think he's totally right, he's always said, Prince William is the best of both of his parents, and Prince Harry was the worst of both of his parents. And I think most unfortunately, when you throw your own family under the proverbial royal bus for money, you commercialize your own family, and last but not least, absolutely worse than everything, you commercialize it, but also you're a hypocrite. Hypocritical Harry should not have declared that he has panic attacks when he sees the media, media, and the media are snapping all their cameras, and then leverage the media, use the paparazzi, and move to California with 3 PR firms hired. I think he's been a hypocrite with too many issues, and people can say, oh, it's the influence of his wife, etc. But then is he a real man? He needs to man up and put his foot down. But he's certainly been shown to be a hypocrite, to be nasty to his own family, and he does not deserve any longer to be part of a family that he threw under the proverbial royal bus.
Mally, there was excitement in America when it was announced that Meghan and Harry were coming. You know, they're royals, it's sexy, it's all very exciting. Is it fair to say now that the shine has well and truly worn off this couple when it comes to their perception in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big royal follower, but a lot of folks in America are, and they were certainly interested in this, and there was all this excitement. And I think what you see is in America, I think there's just lost interest, right? There's not as much, division about what you think of Meghan, what you think of Harry. I think there's just not as much interest there. And then you see, as what Hillary was saying, there's a lot of division in the UK on how they should be treated and what people think about them. I don't have strong opinions. I do hope, though, Harry could go to the coronation just because they're a family, and I think it's incredibly sad when brothers and family, aren't coming together. And I just hope there can be some reconciliation. But I know there's a lot of history there and a lot they would have to get over.
And I would actually, can I just add that I covered their wedding when literally the crowds were 15 deep in Windsor. And one of the things I've always thought, not only did they squander all that popularity, let alone the fact that the Queen, the late beloved Queen, she intended for them to literally head up the Commonwealth. Maybe they should reimburse the British taxpayer for their wedding, since they don't appreciate the family, nor all the royal family gave to them.
Yes, I'm instinctively closer to Hillary than Mally there. I would maintain their banishment, but maybe that's just me being cynical and grumpy. Still ahead on The Late Show Live.
Splashdown confirmed.
Copy splashdown, waiting on VLDR.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time. Integrity's astronauts back on Earth.
More extraordinary footage. It was a moment in history. NASA's Artemis II crew splashing down back on planet Earth, and tonight they've revealed exactly what it's like to be in outer space. But also on the show tonight, it could be the election that reshapes the future of Europe. Will Viktor Orban be able to cling on to power in Hungary? The polls open in just hours. America backs him, but do you? This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News,
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News breakfast is there.
with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it? We're here again.
To start your day just right.
GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. I'm Will Kingston. Still ahead, a major visa scandal exposed. Another one. Thousands of Asian, African and Middle Eastern migrants have come to Britain under the government's Ukrainian free visa scheme. We'll get to that shortly. But first, let's delve into some of the main stories on tomorrow's front pages, starting with the Mail on Sunday. Le humiliation. I must admit the Australian accent doesn't particularly do well with the French language, but nonetheless, the once mighty Navy faces begging the French fleet for help to patrol our own waters as the PM is mocked for the Chagos deal U-turn. Yeah, Charlie, this is yet another example of the armed forces of this country being woefully undermanned, under-resourced, and now to have the French mocking us is well, that really is salt in the wound.
Oh, totally. And look, we're giving the French, I think it was about £700 million as part of the previous deal, where they, by records that I would probably dispute, and I think a lot of other people would dispute, that they were only able to stop 1/3 of those small boat crossings. And this is serious stuff. This isn't just the politicking between the UK and French and UK taxpayers giving money. We saw a boat capsize, earlier on in the week, where people lost their lives. Now, you could argue, if that boat was not able to leave Calais, then that might not have happened. So very happy to work with the French, obviously, to stop the crisis, the boat pulling into the UK, but to stop the boats in general. But the fact that we don't seem to have any kind of military or any kind of force to patrol the waters is, again, a kick in the teeth to the UK.
Well, Matthew, to Charlie's point, the fundamental problem of doing a deal with the French regarding small boats is ultimately not in their interest to basically bring illegal migrants back to their country. They would be very, very happy for them to go to the UK and stay in the UK. Surely that undermines any sort of deal that is made.
Well, I would argue it's actually in the interests of the French to take back people across the Channel, because then you wouldn't have camps in northern France, or it'd be much less likely that you'd have camps in northern France. So I wonder whether this, and I've said this several times before, this is some sort of punishment beating by the French of the British for Brexit. On the issue of this so-called le humiliation, which I think you pronounced actually better than I did, it's not the French who are mocking us, it's the Mail on Sunday mocking us. I mean, thanks a lot, Mail on Sunday. We can do without it. We've got Trump doing that. We don't need a British newspaper doing it. The Mail says that the PM is mocked for the Chagos deal U-turn. I'll say it again. Donald Trump, I counted it, U-turned on his U-turn, on his U-turn, on the Chagos deal. And Rubio welcomed the Chagos deal in May of last year. The President of the United States has behaved disgracefully, like a sort of giant man-child, throwing his toys out of the pram when he was rebuffed by NATO, including by Britain, over his desires on Greenland. Absolutely outrageous. On the issue of the fleet, and this is a very serious point, and I'll make it very quickly, I have driven one of our destroyers. literally driven it. It was, I think, a 1.3 billion pound warship, and the captain allowed me briefly to drive it when I was filming a documentary that I was presenting for the BBC. These are extraordinary.
Did you crash it?
Certainly not. These are extraordinary.
That's why we don't have any left.
These are extraordinary vessels. It is sad. It saddens me that our armed forces, and indeed our Navy, appear to be in the state that they are. This has been run down year after year after year, hugely by the Conservatives, but now the ball is firmly in the Labour government's court. And I call on Keir Starmer to do the right thing and to rebuild our armed forces. We cannot have a bigger wake-up call than what we have received in the last few weeks during this Iran.
I agree.
So, Charlie, on that point, Keir Starmer has said at some point in the future the aim is 3% of total of the budget spending going towards defence. No timeline, of course, and because we are in a very low growth environment, and there are a lot of other boondoggles that they are more than happy to spend their money on. I personally have no faith that they will be able to reach that target.
Well, they can take every penny that they would have had to spend on the Chagos Island deal and spend that on defence tomorrow. They could literally take it from one column in the Treasury and say all of that money that was earmarked to lease back a bit of land that we owned, which was obviously a terrible deal in the first place, and put that all into the defence budget.
Sadly, I think it is more likely that will go in the welfare column.
Well, they can't
exactly,
because they're going to be spending that money, presumably, to clear Keir Starmer's name as he's accused of ethnic cleansing.
Well, that would be wrong. But we can't have this, underspending of defence again, because our forces have been depleted and we've been found wanting.
Do you think the public cares enough, though? Because if the public were yelling and screaming and going, we need to invest in defence, then you would think that the government would actually be more behind this. I'm actually not sure that the public...
When we come to general elections, and we've got local elections coming up, let alone local elections, but with general elections, it's just not really talked about, is it? When people go on the doorstep canvassing for whichever party, you don't say, vote for us and we will hike up defence spending.
Yes.
More coming up in the next hour, ladies and gentlemen, including this.
I have nothing against with the Muslim civilization. I think it's a great achievement of the human being, and definitely they have their own place. And this place is definitely not Hungary.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, it's much of the same as we go through today. Sunny spells and blustery showers. They're going to be on the heavy side, possibly thundery, before turning chilly overnight into Monday. So a dry and bright start initially across the eastern parts of England and into East Anglia. However, showers already in the west will start swiftly pushing their way through. Some of these are going to be heavy with the odd rumble of thunder and some hail. To the north, closest to the area of low pressure, most frequent showers affecting Scotland and Northern Ireland, and strong winds here, especially first thing. Lighter to the south, highs of 13 or 14 degrees. Now, as we end the weekend, further showers still persisting. Some of these actually merging across Scotland to give longer spells of rain through this evening. Likewise across Northern Ireland, but there will be some clearer spells in between as well. And then showers across much of the rest of the UK, into Wales, into East Anglia and into the far southwest. But as we go through the night, that area of low pressure that's been dominating our weather will continue to clear its way northwards across Scotland. So showers still persisting here. Elsewhere, especially inland, actually those showers will start easing away. We'll see clearer skies developing, allowing for some mist and fog patches, much lighter winds and temperatures falling to give a touch of frost to start Monday morning. So that leads to a much calmer start to Monday morning. Any mist fog will quickly lift and clear. And then for many, there should be some sunny spells initially. However, cloud will start bubbling up as we head into the afternoon, and we'll see further showers developing. Again, still on the heavy side, but slow moving given the lighter winds. Temperatures up at around 13 or 14 degrees. That's all from me for now. I'll catch you soon. Bye-bye.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
thank you to our global community for watching and listening to GB News. We're not only the #1 news channel in Britain, we're chosen by you around the world.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis, in the car,
in the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there. With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it? We're here again.
To start your day just right.
GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Every week there are stories that shape the national conversation.
We'll be discussing that.
And on Saturday Morning Live, we break them down.
Is that true? This is fascinating, isn't it?
The politics, the headlines, the debates everyone's talking about.
And the questions that you want answered.
Do you think that was a legitimate attack for him to make?
What led you to set up this fantastic movement?
You know what? It's a great question, Olivia.
So what are you waiting for?
Your weekend starts here. Saturdays at 10 a.m. only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, Britain. Good evening, America. And hello, wherever you are watching around the world. This is live from London, GB News, with the stories shaping Britain and America.
We'll see what happens. Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win.
Trump declares victory, but as a fragile ceasefire remains, Vice President JD Vance is dispatched to Pakistan for crunch talks to bring it to a permanent end. Also,
between 2021 and 2024, we saw over 2.6 million more people enter this country than leave it.
yet another visa scandal. Thousands of Asian, African and Middle Eastern migrants have entered the UK under the Ukrainian free visa scheme. And
now they're looking to essentially just do a lease and sell it, and I'm against that. You know, it's a reasonably nothing like Greenland, but it's a reasonably important area of the globe.
Well, it's a win for anyone who believes in the greatness of Britain. Mauritius has vowed to take over the Chagos Islands after the Prime Minister was forced to shelve the deal. And breaking tonight, the United Nations is reviewing whether the deal breaches human rights laws, as well as the government is accused of ethnic cleansing. Plus,
I have nothing against with the Muslim civilization. I think it's a great achievement of the human being, and definitely they have their own place. And this place is definitely not Hungary.
The bane of Brussels. Hungary is just hours away from one of the most important elections in recent times. It could reshape the future of Europe and have lessons for Nigel Farage. Elsewhere,
many people find President Trump's actions to be an anathema. They find his words unstatesmanlike, his treatment of allies needlessly provocative.
an unstatesmanlike president? Is Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch right? Are we now living in a new Trumpian age where anything goes? Well, anything goes on The Late Show Live. I'm Will Kingston. Get excited. If anything, I'm getting slower on that sprint from the studio to the table. I'm Will Kingston. This is The Late Show Live. Thank you very much for your company this morning. Joining me in the London studio is my panel, former Conservative advisor Charlie Rowley and political commentator Matthew Stadlen. In Washington is political commentator Hilary Fordwich and Democratic strategist Mally Smith. Thank you very much, one and all, for joining me this evening / this morning. Moving on to the main news in this hour, and in just a matter of hours, voters in Hungary will be heading to the polls in what could be one of the most critical elections facing the future of Europe. Prime Minister Viktor Orban will see his current 16-year run of power challenged by Peter Magyar, who appears to be leading in the polls. In recent days, both Vice President JD Vance and President Trump have declared their support for Orban, who has achieved net zero migration.
We reject the faceless bureaucrats who would drive your energy costs through the roof and open your country to millions of unvetted foreigners in the name of progress. I see the way they look down at, they scoff at European and American peoples who want job security and control of migration. And we want you to make a decision about your future with no outside forces pressuring you or telling you what to do. I'm not telling you exactly who to vote for. But what I am telling you is that the bureaucrats in Brussels, those people should not be listened to. Listen to your hearts, listen to your souls, and listen to the sovereignty of the Hungarian people.
I'd suggest JD may well have been telling them who to vote for, but maybe in a slightly subtle way. Just a few weeks ago, GBNews sat down with Viktor Orban in his first interview with a UK broadcaster.
From a British point of view, what seems very frustrating is that we left the European Union in part to control migration, and yet last year 40,000 people crossed the Channel on small boats, even though we're outside the EU, whereas you've managed to control the situation from within the EU. What's the secret?
Determination. So if you decide that you stop them, stop them. So sometimes it's not the nicest job. But if you decide that this is our border line and nobody can cross it without our permission, you have to keep the line, and you have to do so.
Viktor Orban is also known for his persistent clashes with the European Union, which he calls an illiberal state. Their clash even saw billions in funding to Hungary frozen by the bloc over rule of law concerns. And now he's facing opposition from someone who has promised to unfreeze those funds and rebuild a relationship with the EU. Joining me in London, my panel, Charlie Rowley and Matthew Stadlen. Gentlemen, this is an important election, I think, not just for Hungary, but the sort of muscular version of right-wing politics that Orban has used very successfully in Hungary is a model potentially for some of the right-wing insurgent parties in the UK, in Australia even. How do you think this will play out, and do you think it is fair that this will be there will be some lessons for the UK?
Yeah, I think there will be. I mean, look, someone that's been in power for 16 years, it's a long time, and particularly in European Western sort of democracies, it's, it could go either way. We're hearing it could go either way in terms of just on the back of the polling. But I think it will be important because, Viktor Orban, he's got support from Donald Trump, he's got support from, the right of Australia, for example, as you were just mentioning there, Will, because he's a bit of a disruptor. And he said in that interview that your viewers and listeners were just hearing, when it comes to stopping in our version of stopping the boats, stopping illegal immigration, you've got to be determined. You've got to do it. And it's not the nicest job in the world, because obviously we're talking about people, but the more people that you do let into a country, particularly illegally, and as we're seeing, people come on small boats and they're getting access to hotels, healthcare and all the rest of it. They're not being processed quick enough. They don't have a determinate status, therefore they end up sort of staying in the UK for far too long, and then are lost in the system and creating communities that are and bringing cultures that are not that don't adhere to British values and all the rest of it. You have to be determined to say to those people, no, you're not coming in, we're going to do something about it. That's a different mentality, to example, what the EU has had in the past, which has obviously been free movement of people, which is exactly part of the reason why the UK left the EU in the first place. So very different country, very different way of doing things, but we could learn lessons from them.
You're right, I did like that rhetoric around immigration, because I think you hear a lot from various groups that, well, this is just a bit too hard, or there's other factors outside of our control, like push factors around the world, when really I do think that immigration, particularly the boats crisis, is a question of political will, not political skill. Matthew, I don't imagine you are part of the Viktor Orban fan club.
I'm not. I think his comments about Islam having no place in Hungary are outrageous. He's a prime minister of a country where there are a tiny, tiny number of Muslims. It's an unprime-ministerial thing to be saying. Islam, as far as I know, by the way, I don't know much about Hungary, but Islam, as far as I know, has been part of Hungary since its foundation. In the 9th century, some of the invading Hungarian tribes or hordes were themselves Muslim.
He would argue that that has led to greater social cohesion.
What has?
Well, having less immigrants coming from Muslim countries has led to a more unified country.
Very cohesive. They're, as Charlie says, split down the middle. We don't know where they're going to vote. I thought it was wildly inappropriate of JD Vance to be going to another country and saying, I'm not telling you who to vote, but I've come all the way over to see you guys and maybe vote for Viktor Orban, is obviously what he was trying to do, as you pointed out. It's a very odd thing for a Vice President of the United States to be doing. As far as our own issue with the boats are concerned, we all, I think, on this panel want the boats to stop. The Prime Minister wants the boats to stop.
Can I just pause there, because we will get to the boats more specifically a bit later in the show, and I want to stay on Hungary. Do you agree with Matthew that it is improper of a US Vice President to go to Hungary in an election campaign and, whilst not explicitly saying it, directing people what direction that they should vote?
I mean, we have to be fair, I suppose. We didn't quite enjoy Obama coming to the UK in 2016 to say that if we voted for Brexit, or if the country voted for Brexit, you know, we'd be at the back of the line.
Some people
or the back of the queue.
Some people enjoyed it. Some people Remainers enjoyed it.
But this is the thing, they might have enjoyed it there, but you can't then say, well, you don't like, you know, the Vice President going to another country to sort of have those influences. But I think there is a broader point where I think, look, Obama back in 2016 was obviously saying stay in the EU because the EU and the US trade very well and you'd be better off in that relationship, just as a thought. We said no, and that's absolutely fine to do so. JD Vance is doing exactly the same thing, I think, in Hungary, to say stick to your guns, continue down your path, because actually the Western European liberal elitism culture, everything that the EU stood for, is coming to an end. You are going to be the leaders, possibly with the UK, for having an independent trade policy, border policy.
Obama did it slightly less heavy-handedly, you have to admit. JD Vance standing up at a podium with Hungarians, presumably Viktor Orban supporters, cheering him as he was effectively telling them to vote for Orban.
Well, let's get the thoughts of our panel in Washington, Hillary Fordwich and Mally Smith. Mally, I will start with you. Obviously, it is in the US's strategic interest to have a strong right-wing government in Hungary, so I can understand that. But I also feel when Trump and Vance talk about Europe, there is an emotional element for them. I do genuinely think that they are worried about free speech concerns. They're worried about what they see as the decline of Europe. What do you make of this intervention from Vance in the Hungarian election campaign?
Well, the Trump administration, and specifically Vance and Trump themselves, have built relationships with Viktor Orban, and they share a lot of policies when it comes to being more restrictive on immigration. So it doesn't surprise me that they would want him to win re-election. I'm a bit surprised that they had JD Vance go do a rally, just because I don't think the efficacy of that, of having a foreign leader come in and do a rally for a candidate, really helps Viktor Orban. And from the polling, it looks like Viktor Orban is on the path to lose. Prediction markets have it about 80%, 70% that Peter Magyar, potentially I'm mispronouncing this guy's name, is favored to win. And the reason he's favored to win is that this Peter guy who's leading the opposition is conservative himself. He's just more aligned with Europe and less antagonistic to Europe. And he's really been able to focus on two things in his campaign that the Hungarian people have appreciated, which is first, talking about Viktor Orban's corruption and connection to Russian oligarchs, and then second, the economy. So even though politics is different in every country, you see a lot of the same themes come up, and that's always an effective theme of a campaign, to talk about the economy and corruption.
This Peter guy was almost Trumpian. I can imagine Donald Trump behind the scenes saying much the same about this this opposition leader. Hillary, what do you make of what we're seeing in Hungary? Do you think it was right that Vance was there?
Well, I will say this. Matthew said that the crowd was jeering him. Actually, what I heard when I saw different parts of it was that they were cheering him, actually. I thought that they were actually rather supportive. I do think, to Mally's point, I do think it's a little bit of a risk when we go into a country where right now Peter, and I won't even attempt his last name, but Peter, I think, yes, there's a 74% chance he will win, although I don't know that I believe any polls in any country. But the Hungarian people haven't had a taste of what a lot of the rest of Europe has had, which is their cultures obviously being diluted. And if you look at countries that have also put their foot down and not accepted all these illegal immigrants, which we would refer to them in the US as migrants in Europe, like Poland, those countries are very safe. Hungary has remained an extremely safe country. Their crime rates are so low. And yes, I agree, kitchen table issues, what Americans refer to as pocketbook issues, cost of living issues are referred to in the UK, are always top of mind. But safety and security is also very high. And the Hungarians, I think, have become too used to having a safe country. They need to feel what it feels like in all the other countries with the high crime rates. All that's happening, like, for example, in Sweden, where their rape rate is off the chart. I think there's an 8,000% increase in rapes. And I think this is something that the Hungarian people aren't really focusing on, and they should.
There was one funny note, though, I have to mention about J.D. Vance's visit, which is J.D. Vance, during that rally, was bragging about such a strong relationship the Trump administration had with Viktor Orban. And to try to illustrate that, he called Viktor Orban and said, look, I call him and he's going to pick up. And then apparently they didn't plan this because Viktor Orban did not pick up, and it went to voicemail, which was just a funny note. And it shows you hijinks and mishaps happen in campaigns worldwide.
I would have liked to have heard the voicemail message. Just a very quick follow-up, Hillary, because Orban has been a model for many leaders around the world for this more muscular brand of right-wing politics. Some people have labelled him an authoritarian. Do you think that the implications of this election will be limited to Hungary, or do you think we will be able to glean more about where the right is going in Europe more generally as a result of this election?
I think you're totally actually right there, Will. I think it's going to be a bellwether for where Europeans are on these issues. And I think you're seeing movements, definitely. I mentioned just before about the rape rate in Sweden. I think the Swedes have put their foot down now with regard to immigrants. I think the French are obviously having a disastrous time. I think it's going to happen in France. And then also in the Netherlands, I lived in Holland for 3 years, heading global business development for KPMG worldwide. And I hear from the Dutch, you know, they're actually at their wits' end with what's happening to their culture. So I do think it'll be a bellwether, and I think all eyes are on this. And last but not least, of course, those bureaucrats in Brussels, don't forget they're unelected, and I think it's something that they make decisions that aren't based on, it's not just national interest, it's the interest of people that have lived in these countries culturally, obviously, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Last but not least, could I just touch on, because we didn't get a chance to interject from over here, with regard to the small boat crisis. To me, as somebody from the business world, this is a business issue. The French, why don't we pay on productivity? If they stop the small boats, they get paid on the number of migrants they actually stop. Get paid on performance.
So just to come back quickly on some of this stuff, first of all, I said that Vance was cheered. I was precisely making that point. He wasn't jeered at all. Yes. But secondly, more importantly, actually, the homicide rate per capita in London, we're told the lowest since records began. London, as we know, I'm a Londoner born and bred, has a very significant immigrant population.
Knife crime and sexual assault have gone up, though.
So when we talk about safety, the per capita homicide rate is the lowest since records began, according to City Hall. And yes,
there are other metrics that have gone up.
Yes, we've got an epidemic recently of phone theft crime. I was the victim of a phone theft crime myself from behind. But let's not buy into this nonsense that London has somehow fallen, that bot farms around the world are trying to promote, because it's complete, that word, nonsense.
What do you make of the trend line on sexual assault and knife crime specifically, which have been rising?
I haven't seen those figures myself. If you're correct about them, they need to be clamped down on. But if you're trying to link those to immigrants, you need to show me this. You just need to show me the evidence.
London has never felt more safe.
Hillary,
unsafe.
You think it's unsafe, do you?
Absolutely.
Hillary, a quick right of reply from you.
Well, actually, I'd like to see the statistics, yes, and I'd like to see how many of those are immigrants, because most of the statistics that I've seen, actually, I think they do point to the rape rates and the crimes that are disproportionately committed by illegal, what in America we refer to as illegal immigrants and what you refer to as migrants in the UK. And Matthew even admitted he's been a victim of crime. And let's look at the cell phone stealing, all those moped drive-bys. Maybe they're Brits, regular born British people, but let's have a look at those statistics. Let's actually put them up on screen. Let's find those.
So you don't know what you're talking about then, do you? You said maybe they're Brits. You're trying to use the crime that I suffered from as an example to substantiate your problem with immigration when you don't even have the statistics.
Well, let's have a look at the statistics.
Our team will be getting that behind the scenes. Hillary, Mally, thank you very much from Washington. Let me know your thoughts by visiting gbnews.com/your say. Messages are flowing through thick and fast. Jackie has said Viktor Orban would quickly put the great back into Britain. Nick says if Hungary don't vote Orban back in, then Hungarians are going to have a really bad ride over the next parliament. Much buyer's remorse, just as we have here with Labor. And Addy says Viktor Orban is the only sensible leader in the EU regarding illegal immigration. Still ahead on The Late Show Live.
Many people find President Trump's actions to be an anathema. They find his words unstatesmanlike, his treatment of allies needlessly provocative.
Is Kemi Badenoch right? Is Donald Trump acting in an unstatesmanlike manner to his supposed allies? And are we in a new era of political discourse? But also tonight,
between 2021 and 2024, we saw over 2.6 million more people enter this country than leave it.
this is going to make your blood boil. Thousands of Asian, African and Middle Eastern migrants have entered the UK under the Ukrainian free visa scheme. Is that what you were told the scheme was really meant for? I doubt it. This is The Late Show Live, only on GBNews.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of reports. I've been meeting for many hours, as you probably have noticed. We'll see what happens. Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win. We totally defeated that country. And so let's see what happens. Maybe they make a deal, maybe they don't. It doesn't matter. From the standpoint of America, we win. One of the things that's happening is that boats are sailing up and heading out to our country. With big, beautiful tankers, and we're loading them up with oil and gas and everything else, and it's a pretty beautiful thing to see.
Big, beautiful tankers, that's a new one. Welcome back to The Late Show Live. That was President Donald Trump speaking a little earlier this evening, declaring that it doesn't matter to him if America reaches a peace deal with Iran. But one person it might matter slightly more to is JD Vance, because it's been an incredibly tense day of talks in Islamabad as he met with Iranian negotiators to try and bring an end to the Iran war. Pakistan officials say talks have been largely positive, but that a stalemate persists over control of the Strait of Hormuz, with Iranian state media calling America's demands excessive and unacceptable. GB News understands the talks have been ongoing for over 15 hours now, and they are still continuing. Tonight, Pope Leo also intervened, announcing the delusion of omnipotence and demanding that political leaders stop and negotiate peace. The delusion of omnipotence, whatever that means. With me now is senior Iran analyst for Dawn, Omid Memarian. Omid, thank you very much for joining me. I want to start with the conversations that are taking place in Pakistan. How confident are you that the United States will be able to reach a deal in which Donald Trump can credibly claim that they have not just achieved their military objectives, but they have geopolitically also got what they wanted out of this conflict?
Thanks for having me. These are very high-stake negotiations. Iran has been under attack for more than a month. More than 13,000 places in Iran have been hit. Still functioning, operating, still firing back missiles and drones. And the U.S. is in a position that to wrap up this war, because economically for the U.S. is getting costly and costly. So both sides, they want this ceasefire to last longer and to get to a deal, but at the same time, both countries want to have this image of winning, both in the U.S. and Iran. What President Trump said today regarding the fact that we have won militarily, regardless of the negotiations, whether they get to an agreement or not, I think that is aimed at relieving pressure from J.D. Vance and the negotiating team, because President Trump knows that this is a very, very difficult negotiation with Iranians. Both the U.S. and Iran, they have listed a number of demands and grievances and issues that are maximalist. And to get to a point that both countries can compromise, it's going to be very difficult.
Well, it'll be very difficult because the pain threshold for both countries is very, very different, in that Iran is obviously not a democracy, it's a theocratic death cult. They don't care about the pain that is inflicted upon their citizens in the same way that, say, the United States does. The United States are aware that it is an unpopular war. They know, Donald Trump knows that for his political popularity, he needs to try and find some sort of a solution quickly. Does that put the United States at a severe disadvantage?
That's a very important point that you raised. Yes, Iran is not a democracy. We have a repressive government, and they are not accountable to their people. Just in January, we had a massacre in which thousands of people lost their lives. And the Iranian government is in this with this calculus that we cause more pain to the U.S. and to the countries in the region, and this is going to be the deterrence for Iranians. That the more suffering and the more cost we create for the U.S., it might end the war sooner. And for them, being hit 13,000 times and losing a good portion of their military is not something to change their calculus. But in the U.S., as you mentioned, every change in the price of oil and gas can really move the polls. And for the president, at the year of the election in November, we had the midterm election. It's going to be very costly. So that makes the U.S. That's one of those asymmetric elements in this whole war that we have been facing, and it's going to hit during these negotiations too.
And they've been speaking now for 15 hours in negotiations. Paint a bit of a picture for me of how these sorts of conversations actually take place. Is it all very, very scripted and formal? How would the conversation be structured? How do these things work?
You know, in 2015, the negotiations that led to the nuclear deal between Iranians and Obama administration, the Obama administration, it took almost 15 months. The fact that the U.S. and Iran at this time, they don't have an agenda, a kind of framework to work with, and also they have a very little time, makes it very, very difficult to have any result in a very short time. They have been talking for 16 hours. When I was checking like a half an hour ago, they have been still talking till 4 a.m. local time in Islamabad, Pakistan, and that means there are constructive conversations, and there are issues that they can still talk. There has not been a block at the middle of the conversations, so the negotiating teams to leave the place. That means, you know, they are still working on it, and it's a very historic event, because since the revolution in Iran in 1979, we have never had a kind of negotiations that the Vice President of the United States meet with Iranians and negotiate with them directly. And there hasn't been any briefing from the Pakistani Prime Minister or Americans or Iranians about the meeting. That means they are keeping it very tight. They are working on getting a framework and just getting to a point that, you know, basically, so they can extend the negotiations, extend the ceasefire. We have to see what happens.
Ahmed, thank you for your time this morning. Charlie, I thought that comment, I don't really care if a deal is made, from Donald Trump, actually off-brand, because this is the art of the deal maestro. Deal-making is the thing that he loves more than anything else in the world. So for him to say, well, you know what, I don't really care either way, we've won, you know, it's all good, basically. Can you infer an element of frustration through that?
Yeah, I think you can. I think it's, you know, it goes to the point that a few people were making earlier on. It's that sort of the saving face that, you know, he's gone in, he's obliterated Iran's, you know, navy, its air force, some of its critical infrastructure. It's not really had the clarity of the aims that it wants to achieve. I'm still not really the wiser to know whether it was for regime change or not, because it wanted the Iranian people to come up and create the regime change. So
the term was create the conditions for regime change, I believe, is what Donald Trump said.
Right, but if you're going in to attack a country, you know, you've got to be absolutely critical about what the objectives are and the goals, and I think he sort of found in this, when he's called for UK support, even just using UK air bases to allow US fighter jets to go into Iran. That was declined. Other countries didn't come forward. He's obviously been critical of NATO. I think he's now at that point where he just thinks, well, I've done my bit. And it really is. And he said, you know, it's now over to you guys. You know, Europe, you're the ones that are affected by the Straits of Hormuz. America isn't. I've done my bit. So if there's a deal or not, who cares?
I think he's saying that if there's a deal or not, it's no skin off his nose. Presumably, because he doesn't think there will be a deal, or that there might not be a deal, and so he's getting his bit in first. If there are any, well, fanboys or fangirls in Britain left of Donald Trump, please give up your fandom, because he could not be more clear. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about the price at the petrol pump for the working man and woman up and down this country that has soared since the start of this war. He doesn't care about your energy prices later this year. The Strait of Hormuz was open before Trump rushed to war. And by the way, on this issue of rushing to war, if he was going to rush to war, the time to rush to war would have been a little sooner than he did. And then maybe there might, I don't know, but maybe there might have been a better chance of regime change instead of the thousands of people who were brutally murdered by the regime.
Well, I think he's always been very clear about America first. And I think to the extent that there are some people in this country who still respect him, it is because they respect a leader who does put his country so ruthlessly first in his priorities. And there is a perception amongst people that Keir Starmer doesn't do that.
He's not putting America first, Will, because he's destroying America's reputation around the world. If Donald Trump is saying to his allies, Britain, France, Australia, South Korea, I don't care about you guys, go and get your own oil, do you think that's putting America first? Well, putting America first is more than how you talk to your own people, how you make them feel about themselves. And by the way, it makes a lot of Americans feel very bad about America. It is the standing of your country in the world.
Well, sorry, Charlie. Sorry, Charlie. I do want to bring in Washington here to actually get their thoughts. I'll go to you, Mally, first. We just heard about the impact that Donald Trump is having on particular allies around the world. How much damage do you think has been done to relationships across the Anglosphere with countries like the UK, Australia, Canada, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a political loser for Trump, both domestically, which you could see in the polling because of rising gas prices, and we're also going to have knock-on effects with rising food prices and rising prices for electronics because of semiconductor price increases. But it's also been a problem for him internationally, simply because we live in a global economy, and a lot of leaders are looking at their economies getting worse because of the same gas price and oil constraints the U.S. is having because of this war. And I think that the big issue he had is that he didn't lay out a very affirmative case before starting the war. You could say he was trying to do that because he likes to be unpredictable and he didn't want Iran to know when he was going to attack, if he was going to attack. But that came at the cost of having an international coalition there with him by his side. And I think what's really been damaging too is not only has this hurt U.S. allies, it's empowered some of our worst adversaries. The Russians have made billions of dollars because of oil price increases because of this war, and that is going to be able to help fund their unjust war in Ukraine. China is more than happy to see us get bogged down in another Middle Eastern war. So I think the fact that it both has not been helpful to our allies and that it has empowered our enemies has not been a great look for Trump internationally.
Yeah, Hillary, how do you think about those geopolitical power dynamics that Mally was just referring to?
Actually, sadly, I have to say that I reluctantly agree with Mally on many of his points. In addition to the points he made, also I would add about fertilizer. That's going to affect our food supply and the food chain for quite some time because of fertilizer. Obviously, those costs can't be recouped. So I think this is going to drastically impact all, basically, of the Western world. And with regard to our adversaries, obviously China has purportedly been sending missiles in to Iran and in support of Iran. So I think that it's really been a rallying for our adversaries. The one thing I will say is I do think that it's in the long run, if we do come out of this better, then the world will be extremely grateful to President Trump. I do think that he did not envision, and nor did anybody really envision, the amount of dissension that there would be amongst all the Western allies that I think that he probably would have thought would have rallied to his support, let alone NATO. One thing I will say that I think is surprising but very good, if I could add something good here, is to see the Arab nations all unite really behind him. I think that's been a surprise, and we've seen a new world order to that degree, which has been one of the good outcomes from this.
Yes, it has further alienated the other Gulf states against Iran, I would agree. And the other point that does need to be made in terms of surprises that have come out of this conflict, we have heard some evidence that from leaks that there was a conversation between J.D. Vance and Benjamin Netanyahu a couple of weeks ago, where Vance very firmly stated that he was annoyed that Netanyahu had oversold the fragility of the Iranian regime. So I think that is something that potentially the US has been taken by surprise with. Guys, thank you very much for your time in this hour. Still to come on The Late Show Live.
Splashdown confirmed.
Copy splashdown, waiting on VLDR.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time. Integrity's astronauts back on Earth.
To infinity and beyond. I've always wanted to say that on TV. NASA's Artemis 2 crew splashing down back on planet Earth, and tonight they've revealed exactly what it's like to be in outer space. But first tonight, a major visa scandal exposed thousands of Asian, African and Middle Eastern migrants have come to Britain under the government's Ukrainian free visa scheme. We'll get into all of that next. This is The Late Show Live, only on GBNews.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, it's much of the same as we go through today. Sunny spells and blustery showers. They're going to be on the heavy side, possibly thundery, before turning chilly overnight into Monday. So a dry and bright start initially across the eastern parts of England and into East Anglia. However, showers already in the west will start swiftly pushing their way through. Some of these are going to be heavy with the odd rumble of thunder and some hail. To the north closest to the area of low pressure, most frequent showers affecting Scotland and Northern Ireland, and strong winds here, especially first thing, lighter to the south, highs of 13 or 14 degrees. Now, as we end the weekend, further showers still persisting. Some of these actually merging across Scotland to give longer spells of rain through this evening. Likewise across Northern Ireland, but there will be some clearer spells in between as well. And then showers across much of the rest of the UK, into Wales, into East Anglia and into the far southwest. But as we go through the night, that area of low pressure that's been dominating our weather will continue to clear its way northwards across Scotland. So showers still persisting here. Elsewhere, especially inland, actually those showers will start easing away. We'll see clearer skies developing, allowing for some mist and fog patches, much lighter winds and temperatures falling to give a touch of frost to start Monday morning. So that leads to a much calmer start to Monday morning. Any mist fog will quickly lift and clear. And then for many, there should be some sunny spells initially. However, cloud will start bubbling up as we head into the afternoon, and we'll see further showers developing. Again, still on the heavy side, but slow moving given the lighter winds. Temperatures up at around 13 or 14 degrees. That's all from me for now. I'll catch you soon. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Between 2021 and 2024, we saw over 2.6 million more people enter this country than leave it.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. Do you remember that from Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood? She was bashing the previous visa schemes in place under the Conservatives. Well, tonight, The Telegraph has revealed a fresh visa scandal as thousands of migrants from Asia, Africa and the Middle East are reported to have entered Britain through visa schemes originally set up for Ukrainians, according to new figures. The Home Office has issued around 3,500 visas to people from 112 countries, including Afghanistan, Nigeria, Iraq, Iran, India and the Palestinian territories. They qualified by applying as family members of Ukrainians under programs that allowed entry either through UK-based relatives or sponsorship offers from the Homes for Ukraine scheme, I should say. Joining me in London, my panel, Charlie Rowley and Matthew Stadlin. Matthew, surely this is emblematic of a visa and immigration system which is open to widespread fraud and abuse.
Well, first of all, I think it's interesting that the article, as you say, it was 112 countries involved here, but focuses on Afghanis and Palestinians, and that suggests to me a political motive. But also, I'm just looking at the Home Office response to this. The numbers are small. I think it's about 1 in 80 on this scheme who are not themselves Ukrainian. The Homes for Ukraine sponsorship scheme is primarily for Ukrainian nationals. Third country nationals can only be eligible if they apply as part of a family group, right? Part of a family group which must include an immediate family member who is Ukrainian national, and they must apply at the same time. Charlie?
Well, two things. First of all, I was a special advisor at the Department for Levelling Up Housing Communities when we carried out the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So it was a joint venture between us as the Department for Levelling Up and the Home Office. It was specific in what it should have been there for, which is obviously a great way of demonstrating how you can have migration policy through safe and legal routes, which everybody talks about. They do exist. It's there in Ukraine.
I can't imagine that policy is particularly popular with right-wing base now.
Do you know what, actually, I think it was a brilliant demonstration of the UK actually doing its bit. When there is a conflict ongoing, the UK government can say, yes, we want to help our countries that we feel close to, countries that we feel that we can help, and that's people from Ukraine fleeing a conflict. I think that was the reason why so many people did open their hearts and their homes to Ukrainians. I don't think people would say the same for people in Eritrea, because we've got no real link to Eritrea. I don't think many people know what's going on out there, what conflict, and therefore why is it the UK's responsibility to help those particular people, for example? But let's park that for a second.
There were plenty of people who welcomed Syrians and wanted to welcome Syrians from the brutal dictatorship of Assad.
Sure, but that was up to the UK government at the time, whether it wanted to carry out something like we did for Ukraine. They've chosen not to. This government can choose exactly who it wants to admit and who it doesn't. But the idea people say that there aren't the safe and legal routes is obviously bunkum, because we've got one right here. Matthew's right, to a degree, that if you are a Ukrainian and your husband or wife, just whatever form you're filling out happens to be, by definition, from Afghanistan, but you are married and you live in Ukraine, you are able and eligible to leave Ukraine because that's where you currently reside, and you're married to someone that is Ukrainian, you are living in Ukraine, and you want to come to the UK. That is perfectly legitimate. That is, you can't discriminate against somebody's background.
Yeah, imagine if they said, sorry, you can't escape Putin's bombing because you happen to be Australian or Afghanistani. It'd be outrageous.
Precisely. However, the ineptitude of the Home Office and the workings of the Home Office, it is a complete and utter basket case of a department. And we've seen in one particular case that people were admitted to the UK who had no relation to the Homes for Ukraine scheme, but it was it was under the ECHR that said, because things are so terrible.
That was overturned by Shabab and Mahmoud.
Quite, and rightly so. But the fact that the courts are saying, yes, people from any other country can just come to the UK under the Homes for Ukraine scheme is completely and utterly wrong.
On a separate but related point here, it was reported by the BBC, I believe, today that since October there's been about 4,000 refugees admitted into the United States, and all of those bar 3 have been South African. And obviously there's been outrage from the left here. Matthew, I think this is fantastic because South Africans are culturally compatible with the United States. They will be, on average, net contributors to the economy if they are in line with what we've seen from previous South African immigrants, and it's a small intake. How can you argue with that?
I find it so offensive that you talk about some cultures or countries being compatible and others not. No, it's not a fact. There are millions of people in this country, from the sorts of cultures where they're first, second, third generation that you are attacking. And so if you want to say to a child whose parents might be Afghani, Pakistani, Nigerian, I don't know who you do and don't like, Will, if you want to say to that child who might be watching GB News that they're incompatible to our society, then shame on you.
I'm not talking about the individual, I'm talking about the broader cultures.
What does that mean? What is a culture if it's not the composite of individuals? We're talking about human beings, and you're saying on national television that some people in this country, many millions of people in this country, in fact, are not compatible with Britain.
Matthew, 99% of women in Somalia between the ages of 16 and 40 have experienced female genital mutilation.
And are those women incompatible? Are those women incompatible?
How can you tell me? No, but if you are taking men from Somalia and bringing them over here, it is more likely that you are going to see rates of female genital mutilation in this country. How can you tell me that a culture like Somalia, where there is universal female genital mutilation amongst many other barbaric practices, how can you tell me that culture is not only compatible with our country, but also how it is somehow on the same level as it?
People who come from Somalia to this country, or come from Afghanistan, and who are genuine asylum seekers, are seeking asylum precisely because they want to flee the sort of barbaric practices that you are describing. And to write off millions of people in our country who come from, who happen to have ancestry from those parts of the world, I say it again, is profoundly offensive. Those people are precisely the sort of people that, to the extent that we can help, we should be helping.
Matthew, I'm not saying that everyone in that particular country or that particular culture is a bad person, quite the opposite. I'm saying that you have to make risk assessments across different countries in order to protect British people. And if you can see statistically a greater likelihood that particular countries will have particular types of crime or particular practices which are not aligned with British values or aligned with the law, then surely you have to say that we make that risk assessment in order to protect British people.
The Home Office makes risk assessments, or it certainly evaluates the cases of every single asylum seeker who tries to get to this country. We've all agreed we want the boats to stop. It's not a way that people should be trying to get to this country. But to single out certain societies that people are fleeing from, as I say, precisely because they're trying to escape those practices, is outrageous. And I will say this, and I've said it before, if you look at people coming from America, America is a country I love visiting. I wouldn't want to live in America. Let me make the point. It is absolutely riddled with gun crime. You have school massacres in America, partly because of the way in which their constitution protects gun laws. There are people who want to leave America. I have friends who want to leave America because they don't want their children being the victim of gun massacres. That is a country whose culture has guns embedded in it. Now, I'm not saying that I would prefer to live in Somalia than I would in America. What I'm saying is extremely dangerous, inflammatory and offensive to start describing certain cultures as incompatible with this country. You think presumably that Pakistan is incompatible with this country.
Absolutely.
But there are millions of or hundreds of thousands of British Pakistanis who are entirely compatible with our culture, a family of whom are very good friends of mine. Their children are friends with my children. We have English World Cup winners whose parents or grandparents are from Pakistan. How dare you say that these people are not compatible with our country?
As I made the point, I'm not saying every single person in that particular country or community is a bad person.
But what are you saying then?
I'm saying, for example, in Bradford, about 50% of Pakistani families or relationships are first cousin marriages. Now, that is a huge number, and it is not compatible, despite the ridiculous fact that it is somehow still legal in this country, that is not compatible with what we would consider to be British values. And
Charles Darwin was married to his cousin. I wouldn't marry my cousin, but trying to write off great swathes of our population because you're against cousin marriage and using that as a way to say that we shouldn't allow anyone else in from Pakistan is totally outrageous.
That is obviously one point amongst many. I'll bring Charlie in that.
No, I think that there's a balance to be struck. I mean, first of all, you said you didn't want to go and live in America. I don't think America would want you to live in there.
Thanks, Charles.
Thanks. But Kemi Badenoch made this argument a while ago when she said not all cultures are equal. And we've lived in this multicultural society as if everything is equal and everything is pleasant and wonderful, and it hasn't been. And I do actually agree with Will here, because there is now a question where we've got to ask ourselves whether it's a particular religion or a faction of a religion or a culture that believes that, yes, in SGM, that believes in first or second current marriage, that is against gay marriage, that doesn't believe that girls have...
We were against gay marriage until David Cameron changed it, right?
He did.
And Tony Blair brought in the sweeping changes that he brought in.
But
this is like recent time.
One at a time.
Right, but there are cultures, and they happen to be cultures that have... sorry, I thought you were going to interrupt me.
No, go on.
But cultures of people in particular parts of the country, and let's take the Pakistani grooming gang, for example. These are people, we're not talking about all Pakistani people, of course we're not.
We're talking about rapists, let's be clear. We're talking about rapists, scum of the earth.
That have a particular ideology that think that white girls are less of a being in society, that feel that they can be targeted. That is clearly not a...
Sorry, Charlie, to the extent that... Sorry, guys.
That is driven by a cultural belief.
No. I don't know what sort of experts you think you are into the mentalities of these animals. We're talking about rapists here, people who raped girls and young women, right? And to tar whole communities of British Pakistan. No, you are. You are. You're telling me that their cultures are incompatible. No. What's incompatible to our culture is rape, whether it's done by Pakistani monsters or white English monsters. And I'm not having it. We have 500, according to the NSPCC, we have 500,000 children in this country. Let me make the point if you're not scared of my point.
I'm not scared.
500,000 children, according to the NSPCC, which is dedicated to the safety of children, sexually abused in our country every year. The vast majority of those cases are perpetrated by white monsters.
Yes.
Let us not look over there and forget the people under our own noses.
But there is a disproportionate number of those crimes that take place in particular communities where there is a heavy populated Muslim and Pakistani population. Now, you can't sit here and say to me, because the majority of the population is white British, they are the perpetrators, and therefore anything else is just, not worth looking at. Where you have disproportionate levels of health inequality, educational inequality, you target that for specific reasons. Where you see disproportionate amounts of people committing crimes in particular areas of our country who happen to be from a different ethnic background.
Happen to be.
You have to target those people. You have to call it out for what it is, which is why the Home Office is now having a national inquiry.
Charlie, let's be clear about this. I'll come back on this.
No, for you to say, Matthew, hold on. Just because all rapists are therefore the same. Of course they are. They're vile, they are evil people. They do terrible, terrible things. But where where in particular parts of our country there is a culture, and in particular communities, there's the culture, whether it's religious-based, whether it's cultural-based, they have a view that that is acceptable, that goes on, that it is covered up by the police, local authorities, people in the community. That is why we're having a national inquiry.
Sorry, I'm going to come back.
I'm just saying the facts.
No, you're now moving from rapists to apparently there's a problem with British Pakistani communities generally who are covering it up. Then you're telling me that the police are covering up. The police presumably are not Pakistani British, or very few of them are. So that's an issue with the police culture. If the statistics show that there is a disproportionate number of criminals from a particular community, of course it should be looked at. Let me make the point. Look at Trident, for example. Trident was set up, I think, to deal with gun crime, which seemed to be disproportionately amongst black British people. That was a reasonable thing to be done in the circumstances. But let us not pretend that grooming gangs, rape gangs, or indeed child sexual abuse generally is the preserve of one community. And if you keep pointing let me make the point. If you keep pointing the finger over there, and yes, we are having a national inquiry into grooming gangs generally, if you keep pointing the finger over there, you're forgetting the hundreds of thousands of victims over there. Let's call it all out, and let's have a laser-like focus on the abuse and rape of children.
I don't disagree.
One final right of reply before we go to DC.
I don't think anyone disagrees with that, but I just think what Will was saying, what I agree with, and what I think a lot of viewers and listeners will agree with, is that for too long we've been too tolerant of intolerance, and that intolerance is...
I'm not tolerant of intolerance. So just last thing, because he does make the point where racism is used.
Matthew, I want to go to DC. Let's go. Hillary, Mally, you've heard this discussion. Obviously, the US has had its own immigration issues in recent times. Hillary, your general reflections on the discussion we've just had.
I'm ready with statistics, actually. I'd rather not give my opinion. I'd rather give facts, actually. And according to the Ministry of Justice, and excuse me for looking down because I do have to read some of this because I can't remember all of this, foreign nationals, migrants, are overrepresented in sexual offence convictions in the UK compared to their share of the population. Rape convictions. Data indicates that foreign nationals accounted for roughly 1 in 4, approximately 23 to 27% of rape convictions in England and Wales. Total sexual offences, though, for sexual offences overall, foreign nationals accounted for 73% of convictions, according to the Centre for Migration Control Analysis. And arrest rates, they were representing roughly a quarter of the total estimated 35,000 sexual offence arrests. To me, even one. They've come to the UK. They should love the UK. They should embrace the UK if they want to have a chance to assimilate. It's just so sad that speak to the parents of even one girl who was raped by any migrant, let alone anybody. And to Matthew's point, yes, I'm sure there are, white British nationals that have committed rape as well. But we shouldn't have one person in the country, especially when they've been given free housing, free food, and some kind of funding to live in the UK. That should not happen. It should not be tolerated.
Well, Hillary, what would you say to Matthew Stadlin's argument that the focus should be on rape or sexual assault across the board and not have a particular, not focus on a particular cultural or ethnic group? To paraphrase.
I just think that no migrant should be accepted into the country, that once you've committed a crime, you're absolutely gone. And I think it's so sad that there are so many crimes to begin with. It's an issue that I feel very, very strongly on. I know what it took to become a legal immigrant in the US, and I think there are plenty of people that have migrated probably to the UK who are good people, but the statistics don't prove that. And I think it's overwhelmingly negative. And when people come to a country and they don't have the means to exist naturally on their own, and they have to be funded by the government, the British taxpayer is subsidising them, let alone the fact that I know that I think it's 93% of all Muslim women don't work and they're on social benefits, and I think that's a great burden on the taxpayer. So there's a social benefit aspect and there's a crime aspect. I think that's a lose-lose proposition.
Mally, your thoughts?
Well, I'll just speak to the U.S. immigration context because that's what I know much more about. And the U.S. has a very different situation than the U.K. Most of our undocumented immigrants are Latinos coming from Mexico or Latin or Central America, and we have a much larger undocumented population than the UK does, but the
Mally,
statistics.
I'm really sorry, Mally. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We are running short of time on this hour, and I'm going to get this your response after the break. So we will get back to you. Thank you, guys. A Home Office spokesman said the Homes for Ukraine sponsorship scheme is primarily for Ukrainian nationals. Third country nationals can only be eligible if they apply as part of a family group, which must include an immediate family member who is a Ukrainian national, and they must apply at the same time. The Ukrainian scheme remains temporary, in line with the Ukrainian government's strong desire for the future return of its citizens, and do not lead to settlement. I got it out in the end. There's more coming up in the next hour, including this.
Many people find President Trump's actions to be an anathema. They find his words unstatesmanlike, his treatment of allies needlessly provocative.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, it's much of the same as we go through today. Sunny spells and blustery showers. They're going to be on the heavy side, possibly thundery, before turning chilly overnight into Monday. So a dry and bright start initially across the eastern parts of England and into East Anglia. However, showers already in the west will start swiftly pushing their way through. Some of these are going to be heavy with the odd rumble of thunder and some hail. To the north, closest to the area of low pressure, most frequent showers affecting Scotland and Northern Ireland, and strong winds here, especially first thing. Lighter to the south, highs of 13 or 14 degrees. Now, as we end the weekend, further showers still persisting. Some of these actually merging across Scotland to give longer spells of rain through this evening. Likewise across Northern Ireland, but there will be some clearer spells in between as well. And then showers across much of the rest of the UK, into Wales, into East Anglia and into the far southwest. But as we go through the night, that area of low pressure that's been dominating our weather will continue to clear its way northwards across Scotland. So showers still persisting here. Elsewhere, especially inland, actually those showers will start easing away. We'll see clearer skies developing, allowing for some mist and fog patches, much lighter winds and temperatures falling to give a touch of frost to start Monday morning. So that leads to a much calmer start to Monday morning. Any mist fog will quickly lift and clear. And then for many, there should be some sunny spells initially. However, cloud will start bubbling up as we head into the afternoon, and we'll see further showers developing. Again, still on the heavy side, but slow moving given the lighter winds. Temperatures up at around 13 or 14 degrees. That's all from me for now. I'll catch you soon. Bye-bye.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Bold. They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dormy, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From cold mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there. With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it? We're here again. To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, Britain. Good evening, America. Hello, wherever you are watching around the world. This is GB News live from London with the stories shaping Britain and America.
We'll see what happens. Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win.
Victory declared, but as a fragile ceasefire remains, President or Vice President JD Vance is dispatched to Pakistan for crunch talks to bring it to a permanent end. And we could be hearing from him any minute now. Also,
now they're looking to essentially just do a lease and sell it, and I'm against that. You know, it's a reasonably nothing like Greenland, but it's a reasonably important area of the globe.
Breaking tonight, oh the irony, the United Nations is reviewing whether the deal breaches, or the Chagos deal breaches human rights laws, as the government is accused of ethnic cleansing. Plus,
many people find President Trump's actions to be an anathema. They find his words unstatesmanlike, his treatment of allies needlessly provocative.
an unstatesmanlike president? Is Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch right? Are we now living in a new Trumpian age where anything goes? Anything goes, of course, on The Late Show Live. I'm Will Kingston. Get excited for our final hour. Welcome to The Late Show Live. Joining me this evening in London is my panel, former Conservative advisor Charlie Rowley and also political commentator and broadcaster Matthew Stadlen. In Washington is political commentator Hilary Fordwich and Democratic strategist Mally Smith. Hello, one and all. Keep the energy up. There is a lot to discuss. Thank you for joining me tonight. Let's move on to the main news this hour, and it's been an incredibly tense day of talks in Islamabad as Vice President JD Vance met with Iranian negotiators to try and bring an end to the Iran war. Pakistan officials say talks have been largely positive, but that a stalemate persists over control of the Strait of Hormuz, with Iranian state media calling America's demands excessive and unacceptable. And whilst the Vice President might have been trying to bring an end to them through diplomatic channels, the President has taken, unsurprisingly, a more forthright and brash approach.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of reports. I've been meeting for many hours, as you probably have noticed. We'll see what happens. Look, regardless, we win. Regardless what happens, we win. We totally defeated that country. And so let's see what happens. Maybe they make a deal, maybe they don't. From the standpoint of America, we win. One of the things that's happening is that boats are sailing up and heading out to our country with big, beautiful tankers, and we're loading them up with oil and gas and everything else. And it's a pretty beautiful thing to see.
many things I would call a tanker. I probably wouldn't call it beautiful. GB News understands that talks have been ongoing for 15 hours and are still continuing. Tonight, Pope Leo has also intervened, announcing the delusion of omnipotence and demanding that political leaders stop and negotiate peace. Joining me now is foreign correspondent Sarah Firth. Sarah, lovely to see you. We may start with Pope Leo, actually, because it's something we haven't covered on the show to date, or so far. Do you think it is appropriate for the Pope to be wading into these waters?
Yes, well, just quickly before we get on to the main story, a heartfelt get well soon from this side of the pond to our colleague Eamon Holmes, a kinder and more generous journalist you could not hope to meet. But on to this main story. Pope Leo, you're absolutely right. He's been very outspoken about this. He's called for those who have the ability to unleash war, to seek the path of peace. But he's just one of a number of world leaders who've waded into this with their rhetoric, with their opinion, and most importantly with their support, because, Will, you played a clip of the president there speaking a little earlier as he left the White House. He was saying that regardless, he feels that America has won, whether or not Tehran makes a deal at these talks happening in Pakistan. But he went on to say, well, look, we don't need the Strait of Hormuz open. We know that's a key sticking point. But he said other countries do. And whether they're cheap, whether they're afraid, he doesn't know. But they weren't there to support America. And he says NATO didn't support us. I can tell you that. So there is some bad blood now between President Trump, the likes of the UK and other NATO allies who simply didn't step up. And now, of course, Will, we're on the cusp of this historic moment. I mean, the talks alone, it is the first time you've had these high-level talks between such senior US officials, the Vice President J.D. Vance there, high-level Iranian officials since the 1979 Islamic Revolution that set the US and Iran on this collision course. So the fact that they're in the same room, the fact that it's been going for hours, as you said, we've had White House sources telling us 15 hours and counting now, Will, 16 hours and counting. Look, we know President Trump and his team, they are up all hours of the day and night when it comes to issues that concern America. President Trump rarely sleeps, and neither do we on GB News on The Late Show.
Well said. I want to pick up on that comment that you have heard from the administration, and many American commentators have said, look, the Strait of Hormuz is not our problem. We're largely energy independent. This is your problem, Europe, or this is your problem, UK. I don't really buy that for two reasons. Number one, if there is a fee associated with entry into the Strait of Hormuz, that money will directly go back to rearming Iran and its proxies, which would be a big problem for the US. And of course, even if there isn't a fee, but Iran maintains control, that is a huge geopolitical advantage that one of America's greatest enemies has, which they didn't have at the start of the conflict. So the question is that, do you think that argument from them that, you know, Strait of Hormuz, no big deal, stacks up?
No, look, it's very clear, you're right, that from speaking to White House sources, from here in Washington, D.C., that this is a key focus of the administration. The unpopularity of the conflict is largely due for normal Americans to the fact that the energy prices have been rising. The price at the pump has been rising, and they're feeling the effects of this conflict already 6 weeks in. And so there is a lot of focus on when and how this ends, and on these talks, and whether this issue around the Strait of Hormuz gets resolved. Now, we've had very little, Will, in the way of information coming from Islamabad tonight. As you said, we are expecting at any moment Vice President J.D. Vance to address the press pool in that hotel in Islamabad. And there are going to be questions around exactly that. Watch for those questions around the Strait of Hormuz, because this is what is Iran's main leverage. They've made that very clear. They've seen the disruption they were able to cause. And look, on the military side, no question, the US has been able to inflict very serious damage to their military assets, to the Navy, to some of their missile capabilities, to some of their military sites. But it hasn't taken much to launch this asymmetric war in the Strait of Hormuz. They can't bomb that problem away. Now they're trying to talk their way out of it with these diplomatic talks. And I think, well, look, the length of these talks can be read two ways, right? It's certainly a good sign that they've remained in the same room. It's a good sign that they're still talking, but it could also be a sign that some of those issues, like the control of the Strait of Hormuz, like the issue of a nuclear weapon and Iran maybe trading its aspirations for that for some kind of reparations or a lift in sanctions. We're going to be having to wait for that information coming from Vice President J.D. Vance. But look, yeah, the Strait of Hormuz, the nuclear issue, the energy prices, the issue of Lebanon, which Iran has said if Israel doesn't stop striking, they don't want to move forward with a prolonged deal. There are so many issues here, so many proxy conflicts, so many different aspects to this, and they're all being hammered out tonight in that one room in Islamabad.
Sarah, sleep is overrated. Keep up the great work. Thank you for joining me. Well, joining me now is another wonderful guest, Chief Intelligence Officer at Artorias, Stefano Rittendale. Stefano, thank you very much for taking the time. Do we have you there, Stefano? Wonderful. Stefano, thank you for taking the time. You may have just heard my characterisation that I don't agree that the Strait of Hormuz is a non-issue for America because of the power that it would give to Iran, both in terms of rearmament as well as the general geopolitical ability to control that strait and access to it. Do you think that the White House is deliberately underselling how critically important the Strait of Hormuz is to the world?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. And I would agree with you. And I think not only from the statements of President Trump, but I would focus more on the actions of the United States as a whole, specifically the U.S. military. And we already seen U.S. Central Command, the main military command responsible for the war in Iran, announced today that 2 U.S. destroyers did conduct operations in the Straits of Hormuz in preparations to try to reopen it after Iran mined the straits. 2 U.S. destroyers already entered and exited the Straits of Hormuz to probably try to find where these mines are and other safe passages to enable other civilian maritime vessels to go through. And that's a major operation that happened and started right when the negotiations between Vice President J.D. Vance occurred with the Iranian delegations, probably led by the Speaker of Parliament, Ghalibaf. And so the United States currently in having a diplomatic approach, but continue to leverage U.S. military might and these operations to set the tone of how we want to approach this. And obviously with U.S. Central Command launching this naval operations in the Straits of Hormuz, we're sending Iran a message saying, look, we can do this either diplomatically, but we have the military, and the military is already going to act to open the Straits of Hormuz, regardless of what these conversations hold in Islamabad.
For people watching, what you're seeing there is I imagine the door that J.D. Vance will be entering that press conference. We are awaiting his comments. Stefano, this could be seen as a real poison chalice for J.D. Vance. If things don't go to plan, there is every chance that Donald Trump will blame him. If it goes well, it's largely expected. He will make a play for a presidential run in 2028. How do you think he feels about where he sits politically as these conversations continue?
Well, I would think if you're looking at this from the vice president, look, a lot of administrations have leveraged the vice president to conduct foreign policy. For example, President Obama really used the experience of back then Vice President Joe Biden for a lot of foreign policy, specifically related to Ukraine, Russia, and Eastern Europe. And this is just a standard protocol where the president leverages the vice president to lead negotiations because it just sends that gravitas, and the title of the vice president puts much more emphasis and focus. But we've seen President Trump use a lot of mediators to conduct negotiations, such as Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, the special envoys of President Trump, specifically related to very difficult negotiations such as Russia-Ukraine, where we haven't really seen much movement. And I think this scenario as well related to Iran, President Trump is very keen on offering Iran an opportunity to negotiate in good faith and reach a reasonable deal after leveraging military might. But we
Stefano,
also see President
sorry to interrupt you, but to my question though, do you think that J.D. Vance would be unhappy about the position that he's been put in?
I think this is just standard operating procedures for any vice president, and this is the role that they serve at the president, the leisure of the president. And these are difficult negotiations, but we know it's a 2-week ceasefire. J.D. Vance is leading the negotiations. It's very important for President Trump in putting that. But I think if the negotiations fails, I don't think J.D. Vance should look at this as a failure from his behalf. Obviously, it takes 2 to tango. It takes the Iranians to get involved, and J.D. Vance is leading the negotiation with the United States, leveraging all the military might that happened. But it's up to the end of the day, the Iranians see that if they're willing to enter into a reasonable negotiation, and I don't think Vice President J.D. Vance should see this as negative, and if anything, it's part of the duties and responsibilities of a vice president.
Is there a risk that the American public will associate J.D. Vance with this unpopular war and potentially compromise his presidential bid?
Well, I think, that's obviously a key political question. I would say the American people, when we're talking about wars in general, opinion polls always go one way or another. And I think this administration as a whole is viewing this as the lead, and this is kind of something that a lot of Americans view as Trump's war, where I think J.D. Vance might try to mingle his way around this, is trying to say, look, I'm giving Iran the opportunity to negotiate in good faith and reach a diplomatic solution and not require, let's say, boots on the ground inside of Iran. And J.D. Vance can kind of be, let's say, the softer stick in this approach and open the opportunity to negotiate with Iran. And I think it's very important to highlight that today, after the Islamic Revolution in 1979, this is the most senior engagement between a U.S. and Iranian official ever since 1979. And that's a significant diplomatic achievement in and of itself. So Vice President J.D. Vance, although this is very difficult negotiations for him, clearly can state that he has led the Americans into very serious negotiations, something that no other administration has been able to accomplish so far.
Stefano, thank you very much for your time this morning. Well, if you are just tuning in, the live footage that you are seeing is, well, a door, but what that door represents is arguably more important. That is the door that J.D. Vance will be coming through to give an update on the first day of negotiations. They've been speaking for 16 hours, so we eagerly anticipate that. Before that, though, we are joined by policy expert Alison Hun. Alison, thank you very much. Lovely to see you again. What do you think, or well, again, this is speculation at this stage, but what do you think we can expect from J.D. Vance?
Well, I'm also a venture capitalist from Silicon Valley, and that's where J.D. Vance got his start, working for Peter Thiel. And so as a venture capitalist, you invest, you do deals, you do trade, you act very rationally. And the most important thing is keep it simple, Uncle Sam. KISS, K-I-S-S. And so let's make a deal with Iran. And I'm very hopeful that J.D. Vance has learned a lot at his days in venture capital in Silicon Valley. And we focus on the business, the trade, not the ideology. So 3 things I would really like for him to focus on: the big picture, and let everyone else focus on the little details. First and foremost, let's focus on having a rational negotiation. That means no talks of death cults, infidels. The current Iranian administration, the clerics, this is a no-go. Whether you're either with them or you're not with them, you're an Islamic cleric or you're an infidel, and they'll bomb even their Muslim brothers. That's a no-go. So they need to put an administration on board that is a rational player that cares about the Iranian people. Number 2, focus on economic development. It doesn't have to be the U.S., but work with the international community to open up this of Hormuz. And number 3, no nukes. So that means no enrichment, no development of nuclear weapons. Those are the 3 things that we really need to focus on and move away from the ideology of the death cult versus Israel, because as we've seen in the past for the last 50 years, that hasn't worked. This is the art of the deal 2.0. Trump is amazing with the art of the deal, but that was 1.0. He learned his skill in real estate, and so did Jared and Steve Witkoff, no offense to them. But this is a new modern world, and I love to see how J.D. Vance is bringing in peace through prosperity, peace through business. Let's forget about the all the problems of the past, and let's work on ways to move forward for the best of the American people and the Iranian people.
Alison, you mentioned that it's important to dial down the rhetoric. I would agree with that. At the same time, the facts are the facts. It is a theocratic death cult, whether or not that it should be said explicitly. Can that type of regime be trusted to negotiate rationally in these circumstances?
So we don't know, but we have to look at game theory. And so we can't look at the past. We can't look at the future and be anxious with what's going on. We can only be in the moment and keep it simple, like I said. And so we deal with this type of negotiation all the time. In Silicon Valley, there are, various deals floating around. Of course, this is at a macro, very big stage. And so we can only look at what they bring to the table. And I know one of the things that they've talked about is basically having the U.S. withdraw all the bases from the Middle East. That's a no-go. And so they will front load it with unreasonable ask. And so it's J.D. Vance's job to keep this very focused, very grounded. And he is essentially anti-war like me. But if we have to go to war, if there is an imminent threat, yes, we need to protect American interests. But J.D. Vance ran on the platform of no more endless war. Let's focus on Americans. He came, I guess, as a hillbilly, right? And they didn't have good health care, focus on health care for Americans, Trump DX, Trump diagnostics, direct health care to the American people. America is the only place where if you have cancer, you have to file for bankruptcy. So let's focus on our American problems at home and make America great again. That's the platform. But yes, we want to help facilitate this because 20% of trade goes through the Strait of Hormuz. So let's focus on helping Iran and Israel and Pakistan. And I think coming from that position, we want Iran to be prosperous, because if they're prosperous, they're less likely to bomb our allies, our friends, and the American people.
Alison, thank you very much for your time this morning. Going to my panel now in London, Charlie Rowley and Matthew Stadlen. Charlie, I'll start with you. I want to continue on discussing J.D. Vance. I've got a slight bias here. I think he's one of the most interesting political figures of our time. Because of his background and because of the fact he is a very powerful speaker. He's obviously highly intelligent. Do you think he would see this as a no-win position for him, or do you think he would see it as an opportunity?
Well, it's sort of out of his hands, I suppose. He's been deployed to go and take part in these talks. He should see it as an opportunity, because if actually, as the American people, if the polling that we were talking about earlier on is right, that most Americans were not in favour of the action, or certainly won't be in favour of continued action, even after a 2-week ceasefire, then if he can have a way in which he can bring those talks to some sort of resolution, then he might see that as a win, versus who would be his oppo in running in 2028. It would be Mark Rubio, you'd imagine, who was actually being very well heralded and celebrated for being the statesman and being actually potentially more able in terms of policy expertise as a speaker, where J.D. Vance hasn't really got much of a role just as VP at the minute. So that could be interesting. But the only thing I would say, just very quickly on the back of all 3 interviews that you've just had, the reality is Trump doesn't want to be here. Nobody wants to be there, actually. Why would Donald Trump, having taken such a heavy hand to Iran, rightly so in my view, because I want to get rid of that evil regime, and we were talking about the consequences of it, inflation and things like that, that's all true, but inaction is also a decision which leaves a tyrannic regime still in control. But Donald Trump doesn't want to be negotiating with Iran. He would have wanted to beat them. He would want to be in control of Iran. He'd want somebody else to be coming in now and doing what Donald Trump wants them to do, not negotiating with the very same people that he wanted to get rid of.
If you're just tuning in, we're awaiting Vice President J.D. Vance to give an update to the media on the first day of negotiations. It's been going for 16 hours, a mammoth session. Matthew Stadlen, your thoughts?
The guy standing behind the door looks like he wants to sit down. I think we can agree. On J.D. Vance, look, it appears from the outside, I pointed out to you on the show, didn't I, the other day, that he'd been very silent. Uncharacteristically silent.
Compared to Rubio and then some of the other things, yes.
And for someone who appears to enjoy the sound of his own voice. This is a guy who seems to have been dragged along in a war that he didn't want to be involved in. He didn't want America to be involved. Look at his past statements. This could be an opportunity for him, but it is a very important moment for him, because as things stand, he is going to have to be defending in 2 years' time what appears to be a disastrous war.
Well, time will tell on that front, but I do think that this is politically incredibly dangerous for JD Vance. Again, the problem comes when you have to back something as a politician which you are not instinctively behind. You generally run into problems because you don't have your heart in it. He's already rapidly losing the right-wing podcast bros who are violently against this particular conflict. And if, to Matthew Stellan's point, the worst-case scenario holds true and this war ends very, very badly, no doubt that some paint will be stripped off the Vice President by association. Let me bring in my Washington panel, Hilary Fordwich and Mally Smith. Mally, I'll go to you. Let's stay with JD because he will be appearing on our screens imminently. How do you think he is approaching both these negotiations and how he manages the potential political risk that I've just mentioned?
Well, he's in a quagmire here because President Trump himself has said, and he said it jokingly, but there's an element of truth to it, that if the negotiations go well, he'll take all the credit and claim success. And if they go badly, he'll blame J.D. Vance, which puts J.D. Vance in a little bit of a no-win situation. But all the talk about J.D. Vance's political future and how the Iran war might affect it, there's been a lot of focus on the MAGA aspect and how you have MAGA podcasters and commentators who are unhappy. I don't think that's going to be as much of an issue as just the general public, because we've seen in polling that Republicans still broadly support the Trump administration, and him being the sitting vice president, I think he's just going to inherit that support. I think the bigger issue will be is if this war is still polling at where it's polling now, and if it continues to hurt the economy, I think it'll weaken him against whoever his Democrat is in the general election, not necessarily his issues with the MAGA base.
Yeah, we should mention that the next election is 2028. If this ends imminently, which I am assuming he wants it to, then you know, people generally tend to have short memories. It may not be as big an issue as we are making out now. Hilary, what do you make of this and the particularly the calculations that must be running through JD Vance's mind?
Well, it's been a 16-hour negotiation there, Will. I think he'll be absolutely exhausted regardless. But he is extremely diplomatic, and I think he's a very smart man. So if anything can be done, I think J.D. Vance is one of the few people that can actually accomplish it. I think that both sides have a lot to lose if they don't come out of this with some kind of benefit. So I think when something's mutually beneficial, it's more likely to work. I think that we should see, hopefully, enough progress that both can save face, both can feel that they've won, and he definitely needs this for any kind of political future in the US. And to the point with regard to how things are polling for President Trump, Americans fundamentally have always been isolationists. They were in the Second World War. They didn't want to get into the Second World War. Americans are very reluctant to get involved in foreign wars. And as we know, President Trump proclaimed and wanted to be the president of peace. This has not gone down well with the MAGA base. Something positive has to come out of this if J.D. Vance has any hope for a future, in which case he would have gone to the mat to make this work.
Yeah, and Hilary, following up on that piece, again, I don't believe in his heart of hearts that J.D. Vance was committed to this. I'm just looking now, there may be movement. This is like an incredibly slow, boring football game where you're trying to keep the energy up, but we are expecting J.D. Vance imminently for that update on the negotiations from the first day. How do you think he will approach this particular update, and what are you hoping to hear from him?
I'm hoping to hear a result. I'm hoping, put it this way, the best case scenario would be the Strait of Hormuz is open, oil prices are going to absolutely plummet, the consumer, both sides of the Atlantic and globally, consumers will be now not as affected as we thought they would be, you'll all be back to normal, and the Iranian regime will let them stay in place, but they've decided that they'll behave. That is not going to happen. We're not going to get everything we want, but I do believe you're going to see the Strait of Hormuz open, and I don't think the Iranians will be allowed to charge the tariff that they wanted to. I believe it was something like $1 per every barrel of oil, and that would be some of these cargo ships, the oil tankers. They were actually taking 200 million barrels of oil. I don't think they'll be instituting a tariff. I don't think that will be a concession we'll make. I do think what the concessions will all be with regard to letting them stay in office, in place. They care about their own necks. That's what everybody cares about. So I think we'll see that on one side, Strait of Hormuz open, and it'll be enough for both sides to be able to save face. That's what I predict.
And can I add one thing to Hillary's point there, too?
I'll let you, yes.
I think one issue we're also going to have, too, is there's been reporting that the Iranian government does not even know where they have mined the strait. That they have misplaced these mines, which shows you how disastrous war can be. So even if Iran wants to fully reopen the strait, I think we're going to have logistical issues because no company wants to have their tanker go through an area where the government of Iran can't even say definitively whether they've removed all of the mines they've placed because companies hate uncertainty and they hate risk. So hopefully they can get that ironed out too.
Yeah, I think Mali's absolutely right, because don't forget, this is a private issue. This is not a political, nor is this a military issue. The private tankers don't want to take that risk. A very good point, actually, Mali. Well done.
I shudder to think of the size of the insurance bill to put a tanker through the Strait of Hormuz at the moment. Mali, I'll follow up just on that. This president is a master of spinning a defeat into a victory. If there is either a fee that, the Tehran toll booth scenario that is put in place in the Strait of Hormuz, or even if there is no fee but Iran still maintains control of that waterway, I just can't see how the White House could spin that as anything other than a humiliating loss.
Well, I think the fee has to be non-negotiable because that, A, would be a humiliating loss for the Trump administration. And then B, we're talking about the strait being closed, raising prices. If it's either $1 a barrel of oil, which I've heard as well as Hillary has, or the $1 million per vessel, that's going to ramp up costs for Americans because you're going to have that added to the cost of shipping oil. So I think the Trump administration cannot have that happen. I think the way they get out of that and the way the Iranians save face is the Iranians claim a moral victory and say, we shut down the strait and we own it, but they don't actually institute their $1 million tariff or tax, or however you want to describe what that would be. Because the issue the Trump administration has is most economists say the prices have risen and they're going to stay high for a considerable time. Moody Analytics has said that we're expecting higher prices for the next year to 2 years, and the latest inflation report was 3.3%, mostly because gas prices spiked. So they need to figure out how to get this open tomorrow, because even when it's open tomorrow, the price hikes are going to be with us for a bit because the system has to work itself out.
And Mali, just finally,
Mali's right on that, and also with regard, the big issue here is also fertilizer, because it's affected the entire food supply and the supply chain. Fertilizer is going to impact us for a great amount of time.
Yes, and actually on that point, Mali, that is, whilst, again, you can be frustrated in Europe, for example, that the United States has taken this action which has influenced energy prices negatively, do you think it is a fair argument in response that Europe and the United Kingdom have decimated their own energy-intensive industries due to ideological environmental policies, and as a result of that, Americans who say, guys, this ultimately is a problem that's on you, how reasonable do you think that sort of line of argument is?
Well, I think countries need to develop their own energy sources, and I'm someone who believes investing in renewable energy, in green energy, is good for the economy and it's good for energy independence, but I also think it means developing your own oil and natural gas if you have it. So I think if you're a European government and if you're the U.S., this shows you why it's so important to have a diversified economy, both with renewables and with domestic energy production, because as much as this is hurting the economy now, the U.S. is the #1 producer of oil and natural gas in the world. If Iran had closed the Strait 10, 20 years ago, before we had attained that status as the leading producer of oil and natural gas, we would be probably in a recession bordering on depression. So even though it's caused economic pain, it's helped insulate us a bit. But I think it's investing in renewables and your gas and oil sectors.
And what Mali didn't add there was drill, baby, drill from the Trump administration has been extremely successful. Thank goodness that was one of President Trump's.
Thanks, Hillary. We've got to now go to JD Vance, who's about to update you on negotiations today.
Good morning, everybody. And let me say a couple of notes of appreciation. First of all, to the Prime Minister of Pakistan and to Field Marshal Munir, who were both incredible hosts. And whatever shortcomings in the negotiation, it wasn't because of the Pakistanis, who did an amazing job and really tried to help us and the Iranians bridge the gap and get to a deal. We have been at it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms. Questions?
Sir, Nick Robertson from CNN. Precisely what have they rejected here? Can you help us understand it a little bit?
Well, I won't go into all the details because I don't want to negotiate in public after we've negotiated for 21 hours in private. But the simple fact is that we need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon, and they will not seek the tools that would enable them to quickly achieve a nuclear weapon. That is the core goal of the President of the United States, and that's what we've tried to achieve through these negotiations. Again, their nuclear program, such as it is, the enrichment facilities that they had before, they've been destroyed. But the simple question is, do we see a fundamental commitment of will for the Iranians not to develop a nuclear weapon, not just now, not just 2 years from now, but for the long term? We haven't seen that yet. We hope that we will. Jen.
Was there a framework on anything? And also, did the Iranian frozen assets come up, and did you reach any conclusions on those frozen assets?
We talked about all those issues, Jen, and we talked about a number of issues beyond that. And so certainly those things came up. But again, we just could not get to a situation where the Iranians were willing to accept our terms. I think that we were quite flexible. We were quite accommodating. The president told us, you need to come here in good faith and make your best effort to get a deal. We did that. And unfortunately, we weren't able to make any headway. Preston.
Mr. Vice President, how often did you communicate with President Trump throughout the negotiations? There were reports that there were multiple rounds where there were breaks in between negotiations. How often did you communicate with the president throughout those rounds, and what was he saying as you were going through these negotiations that you said fell short?
Yeah, obviously we were talking to the president consistently. I don't know how many times we talked to him, a half dozen times, a dozen times over the past 21 hours. We obviously also talked to Admiral Cooper, to Pete, to Marco, to the entire national security team. We talked to Scott Bessent a number of times. So look, we were constantly in communication with the team because we were negotiating in good faith. And we leave here with a very simple proposal, a method of understanding that is our final and best offer. We'll see if the Iranians accept it. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, where does this lead to Strait of Hormuz?
Did you going back to Prime Minister Netanyahu at all today? What about the Strait of Hormuz? Did they give you any indication of the Supreme Leader?
Well, a short and to the point press conference from Vice President JD Vance, who has said the key message, there has not been a deal after 21 hours of negotiation between the Iranians and the Americans. I repeat, there is no deal that has been reached, and the American team will be flying back to the United States. Reading between the lines, it would appear the main sticking point was on nuclear. He said when he was asked what were the particular reasons why the negotiation did not end successfully, he said that they needed an ironclad commitment that Iran would not pursue a nuclear weapon, as well as not pursuing the materials that are required in order to build a nuclear weapon. So it sounds like that was the main sticking point. He said that the American team were very flexible, but they were unable to reach an accommodation. He did not say how this actually impacts the ceasefire agreement and where that leaves the war now. That will be very interesting to see in the coming hours and days ahead. Matthew Sedlin, what did you make of it?
I thought it was extraordinary, didn't you? I mean, it's brevity, as you say. 21 hours condensed into 2 or 3 minutes. I can't remember such a short press conference.
Yes, I didn't think we'd be coming back on TV. I thought that would take us out.
Indeed. A lot of the news, of course, is in what he said. There is no deal. As you ask, what does that mean for the ceasefire? Are they going to go back? Are they going to go and renegotiate? But also, a lot of the news is in what we didn't hear. My earpiece wasn't working for the first minute or so, but I didn't hear any mention other than in a question that wasn't answered about the Strait of Hormuz. That will send shockwaves, I would have thought, around the world. That will send shockwaves to Downing Street, to the Elysee, to South Korea. And then I thought it was also fascinating that he said, as you pointed out, that the breaking point seemed to revolve around the nuclear issue, right? What were they expecting? Were they expecting an Iranian regime to say, yeah, we're never going to develop or try to develop a nuclear weapon? And if they were expecting them to say that, why would they believe them? That for me, I can't get my head around that. And clearly, there's 21 hours that went into this. That is a huge amount that we don't know. That raises a lot of questions, more perhaps than answers. But the answers that we've got are critical, and that is no deal.
So no deal that has emerged from that particular press conference. The main sticking point appears to be nuclear. A lot of unanswered questions again around what this means for the conflict going forward and the ceasefire that was announced a few days ago. Charlie, your thoughts?
Very similar to Matthew, actually. Not good. If I was still an advisor, and that was sort of the press conference I'd seen from my boss, or having been there for 21 hours and no agreement, and the sticking point is just about a nuclear capability to develop a nuclear weapon, which Iran are clearly not going to say, no, we're not going to ever develop one. But also the hypocrisy of JD Vance there saying, even though the US had sort of obliterated its facilities to do so, they're hanging about for Iran to say, OK, you've taken away all our ability to develop a nuclear weapon, but we're not going to tell you that we're not going to develop one. The idea that that is it after 21 hours, I think, is quite alarming, because
as I say, if Iran had said, yeah, we're not going to develop one, why would JD Vance and the Americans have believed it?
Believe it? So I think it's not good. To put it mildly, because you've got to then ask yourself all the questions that didn't come out of it. As you said about the ceasefire, what happens now?
I think there was only 2 questions from the press.
2 questions?
Two.
Yeah, it seemed to me.
Why do you think they ended it so abruptly?
Because my honest answer off the top of my head is because I probably don't think that JD Vance has the answers. So when you're questioned about tolling, have Iran being stubborn to continue to say that they're actually going to put tolls on ships passing through the Straits of Hormuz, I don't know whether there'll be an answer to that.
JD Vance was clear, wasn't he? Before the election, he was clear that he didn't want a war with Iran, right? Now he's in Pakistan trying to negotiate his administration, the no-war president, out of, as I say, what appears to be a disastrous war with Iran. There is no regime change. There is no relief for the Iranian people. The Strait of Hormuz is not fully open. That's an infinitely worse position on the Strait of Hormuz than before the war started. And now they're not accepting the Iranians' position on nuclear weapons.
Because your question, Will, very quickly, your question is the right one. What happens after the ceasefire? And can you imagine if you'd asked that to JD Vance to say, well, what does this mean for the ceasefire? A war that he's not for anyway, he would have to probably say, well, we've got 2 weeks. And then after that, you can then assume that bombing will restart.
Let's bring in the panel in Washington, Hilary Fordwich and Mally Smith. Hilary, a remarkable press conference for what went unsaid, I would suggest. What were your reflections?
on the fact that after 21 hours, it was just so succinct. It was really actually very abrupt. In fact, we were over here, obviously in the US, and both Mally and I thought that we might not even get another chance to comment on this because he would probably go on as long as President Trump does. I think the reason it was so abbreviated was probably because he's probably more than exhausted after 21 hours. But also what's shocking to me, really, is to see Steve Witkoff is a master negotiator. If Steve Witkoff couldn't get any deal done with J.D. Vance, who has every single, as we talked about earlier, every single political incentive to solve this, if they couldn't get it done, I don't know when it will ever be done. And what I do think is I think we need to look at what's going to happen come maybe tomorrow, Sunday, but definitely Monday morning, and that is with regard to oil prices. I think that they're going to probably skyrocket, and I'm in the business world. I think the business world that's been in a sort of wait-and-see limbo land is going to continue to be in a limbo land. This is not good economically. It's not good politically for either President Trump nor J.D. Vance. I think this is literally so far a lose-lose situation, probably except for the Iranian regime that's hanging on, hanging around, and hasn't been, you know, obliterated.
Mally, I don't think it was personally satisfactory that he didn't cover what does this mean for the conflict. We don't know what this means for the ceasefire. What were your reflections on that, and particularly why do you think he chose not to directly address the implications for the conflict going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think he took only a few questions because he didn't have any good answers for these questions after coming through this long negotiation at essentially a stalemate. And I was also struck that he said, you know, we weren't able to find an answer on their nuclear program. Well, no one was really expecting them to find an answer on Iran's nuclear program in a marathon 21-hour session. What people were hoping was they would build on the ceasefire that was existing, primarily outlined, as we've outlined before, with opening the Strait of Hormuz and potentially on the Iranian side, you know, drawing back Israel's attacks in Lebanon. That's kind of what I think everyone was expecting, not that we would have some sort of deal on the nuclear material. And I think the reason he talked about that is I don't think he wanted to rattle the markets by saying we had a negotiation about the Strait of Hormuz and we couldn't get an answer. I think he wanted to bring it back a bit to try to not make the Strait an issue. But the problem he's going to have is what Hillary touched on, which is when we got the ceasefire, oil futures dropped and then the stock market took off, which was great. But that's all predicated on the ceasefire working and the Strait opening up. The Strait hasn't opened up. So if the markets see this reaction or see this statement from Vance that shows maybe the Strait isn't opening up in the future, the oil prices are going to go up again, and then the stock market is going to drop because they're going to lose faith that, you know, good things are in the future. So I think the Trump administration should brace for a tough Monday for their economic indicators they're looking at, and they should prepare something to try to mitigate that, to say Iran's back at the table.
Yeah, perhaps don't look at your share portfolio on Monday morning. Hillary, Mally, thank you very much. We're now going to go back to the replay of those comments from J.D. Vance, the key news being there is no deal that has been agreed between the Americans and the Iranians. Let's have a look.
Well, good morning, everybody. And let me say a couple of notes of appreciation. First of all, to the Prime Minister of Pakistan and to Field Marshal Munir, who were both incredible hosts. And whatever shortcomings in the negotiation, it wasn't because of the Pakistanis, who did an amazing job and really tried to help us and the Iranians bridge the gap and get to a deal. We have been at it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms. Questions?
Nick Robertson from CNN. Precisely what have they rejected here? Can you help us understand it a little bit?
Well, I won't go into all the details because I don't want to negotiate in public after we negotiated for 21 hours in private. But the simple fact is that we need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon and they will not seek the tools that would enable them to quickly achieve a nuclear weapon. That is the core goal of the President of the United States, and that's what we've tried to achieve through these negotiations. Again, their nuclear program, such as it is, the enrichment facilities that they had before, they've been destroyed. But the simple question is, do we see a fundamental commitment of will for the Iranians not to develop a nuclear weapon, not just now, not just 2 years from now, but for the long term? We haven't seen that yet. We hope that we will. Jen.
Was there a framework on anything? And also, did the Iranian frozen assets come up, and did you reach any conclusions on those frozen assets?
We talked about all those issues, Jen, and we talked about a number of issues beyond that. And so certainly those things came up. But again, we just could not get to a situation where the Iranians were willing to accept our terms. I think that we were quite flexible. We were quite accommodating. The president told us, you need to come here in good faith and make your best effort to get a deal. We did that. And unfortunately, we weren't able to make any headway. Preston.
Mr. Vice President, how often did you communicate with President Trump throughout the negotiations? There were reports that there were multiple rounds where there were breaks in between negotiations. How often did you communicate with the president throughout those rounds, and what was he saying as you were going through these negotiations that you said fell short?
Yeah, obviously we were talking to the president consistently. I don't know how many times we talked to him, a half dozen times, a dozen times over the past 21 hours. We obviously also talked to Admiral Cooper, to Pete, to Marco, to the entire national security team. We talked to Scott Bessent a number of times. So look, we were constantly in communication with the team because we were negotiating in good faith. And we leave here with a very simple proposal, a method of understanding that is our final and best offer. We'll see if the Iranians accept it. Thank you.
Did you going back to war, sir?
Well, a remarkable press conference for what was left unsaid. We do know that there is no deal between the Americans and the Iranians. We know that in all likelihood it was the nuclear issue, both in terms of the desire to build a nuclear weapon as well as the materials that would be required in order to build a nuclear weapon, was a sticking point that J.D. Vance mentioned. But other than that, there are many, many questions that have been left unsaid. And I think that the two critical ones are the future of the Strait of Hormuz and also the future of this conflict and the ceasefire, which we assume is still in place. Matthew, a difficult question, or difficult to speculate, given that there are a lot of gaps there. But where do you think they go from here?
I've got absolutely no idea. And the worrying thing is it doesn't appear that Trump has got any idea, because as we said and showed at the beginning of the programme, he's telling us that whether or not there's a deal doesn't matter to him. And the fact that J.D. Vance didn't himself mention the words, use the words, the Strait of Hormuz, I think he was asked, it was difficult to hear, but I think he was asked about it, he said we covered those issues. I mean, can you imagine that there must be people awake in Downing Street right now and across capitals, not just in Europe, but around the world, hanging on every word there, desperate to know about the fate of the Strait of Hormuz, and no indication other than that they've covered those issues and there is no agreement. This is truly remarkable. The Americans and the Iranians, and ultimately the Iranians, because they're a terrorist regime and they can threaten the Strait of Hormuz even when they're being bombed to bits, they're holding the global economy in their hands.
Charlie?
Well, just to put it into perspective, as you say, after 21 hours, and I timed that whole segment there, and so give or take, just rounding some, just for ease, but it was 55 seconds worth of a statement, less than a minute to address the nation, the world, about what has just happened after those last 21 hours. 55 seconds of a statement, questions 2 minutes and 20 seconds. The whole thing, that whole package of J.D. Vance coming out to the whole world to tell us the update on an international war that's affected everybody was 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
And you just know that if Donald Trump was doing that press conference, we would have still been here in 3 hours.
Of course we would.
We've still been here.
And by the way, we are going to now wait, aren't we? We're waiting with bated breath. The world is waiting to see now what Donald Trump says next.
Exactly. But also because of a lack of that. And I think Donald Trump will have to come out and say something to give the markets, as I think Hillary and Mally were both saying, showing the confidence that actually, when things get back to normal on Monday, that actually there will be some sort of plan, there will be some sort of future conversation, there will be something to shore up the markets and business.
Well, let's go to Hillary and Mally in Washington. Guys, I'll start with you, Mally. We're running short of time, but your reflections on this and where to from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Vance had a tough hand. Not a big fan of his, but I'll say he had a tough hand when going into this, the U.S. and Iran couldn't even agree what the basics of the ceasefire was, let alone helping put some more progress, get some more progress on this deal. But I think J.D. Vance, the Trump administration, are going to have to figure out something to calm the markets, because the markets are going to react negatively to this. And I think that's engaging with the Iranians and showing that negotiations aren't dead. They've just hit a speed bump. But, this is a tough question. Like, I don't think there's any easy answers from here. I think there's only less bad answers at this point.
Hillary, what comes next in 45 seconds or less?
What I think comes next may not come next, but what I think should come next would be a chart. Let's see a chart of exactly where we stand. Let's be very transparent to the entire world. If we don't see such, it probably means that there was so little progress and or that J.D. Vance and Steve Witkoff weren't able to negotiate anything, but a chart would be very helpful for the whole world to see exactly, transparently, where we stand.
Yes, ideally one of those comically oversized ones that Donald Trump likes to pull out. Yes. Hillary, Mally, thank you very much for your contributions this morning. So there you have it. We have heard from Vice President J.D. Vance in a very short press conference. The key takeaway, there is no deal between Iran and America. The sticking point appears to be on the nuclear issue. We have not got clarity on what this means for the ceasefire. We have not got clarity on what this means for the future of the conflict. So there are many unanswered questions, which of course we will be covering on GB News in the hours ahead. These are extraordinary times, ladies and gentlemen. I personally am disappointed by that press conference in that I don't think it provides the clarity for the markets and for the people of America and the world more generally. At the same time, I've got no doubt there will be more conversations behind the scenes. This is far from over. That's all we have for you this evening, or this morning I should say. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. We will be back tomorrow night at midnight. Thank you again. Have a lovely rest of your night.
Good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, it's much of the same as we go through today. Sunny spells and blustery showers. They're going to be on the heavy side, possibly thundery, before turning chilly overnight into Monday. So a dry and bright start initially across the eastern parts of England and into East Anglia. However, showers already in the west will start swiftly pushing their way through. Some of these are going to be heavy with the odd rumble of thunder and some hail. To the north, closest to the area of low pressure, most frequent showers affecting Scotland and Northern Ireland, and strong winds here, especially first thing. Lighter to the south, highs of 13 or 14 degrees. Now, as we end the weekend, further showers still persisting. Some of these actually merging across Scotland to give longer spells of rain through this evening. Likewise across Northern Ireland, but there will be some clearer spells in between as well. And then showers across much of the rest of the UK, into Wales, into East Anglia and into the far southwest. But as we go through the night, that area of low pressure that's been dominating our weather will continue to clear its way northwards across Scotland. So showers still persisting here. Elsewhere, especially inland, actually those showers will start easing away. We'll see clearer skies developing, allowing for some mist and fog patches, much lighter winds and temperatures falling to give a touch of frost to start Monday morning. So that leads to a much calmer start to Monday morning. Any mist fog will quickly lift and clear. And then for many, there should be some sunny spells initially. However, cloud will start bubbling up as we head into the afternoon, and we'll see further showers developing. Again, still on the heavy side, but slow moving given the lighter winds. Temperatures up at around 13 or 14 degrees. That's all from me for now. I'll catch you soon. Bye-bye.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Five hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah.
Uncensored.
Very, very racist tonight on the unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every week there are stories that shape the national conversation.
We'll be discussing that.
And on Saturday Morning Live, we break them down.
Is that true? This is fascinating, isn't it?
The politics, the headlines, the debates everyone's talking about.
And the questions that you want answered.
Do you think that was a legitimate attack for him to make?
What led you to set up this fantastic movement?
You know what? It's a great question, Olivia.
So what are you waiting for?
Your weekend starts here. Saturdays at 10 a.m. only on GB News.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We love Great Britain. We love its history, its culture and its tradition, and that's why we're so proud to be part of GB News.
You look genuinely emotional. Oh, come here.
GB News does pay attention to those who are ignored by the mainstream media. The majority of this country whose forefathers fought and died to maintain liberty, to fight for freedom of speech.
The rule of law, the rights of property and democracy. This is the heritage that our country should be so proud of.
Which of course includes our Christian heritage. There's been a huge resurgence in the number of people going to church. Perhaps they're not finding what they're looking for, and they're looking for something a bit deeper, a bit more truthful, a bit more akin to Britain's Christian heritage.
That's right, get ready, because the most exciting night in general election history starts now!
Good evening, it's 9 o'clock. I'm Alex Armstrong. Tonight on the show. Yes, the Chagos surrender deal is dead, but seemingly the government has taken revenge. More on that. Also,
smacks of an enormous complacency. Well, this smacks of the fact that for years there was underinvestment by the last government.
it's a bit of a nervous topic for the Prime Minister, isn't it? Well, prepare for war. That's the message from the government. But is it an empty message given the state of Britain? And
we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The President has gave us some pretty clear guidelines, and we're going to see.
We'll keep you updated on the latest as talks between the United States and Iran continue in Pakistan. As soon as we hear from respective delegations, we will bring that to you. Are we any closer to peace? That's the big question. I don't think we are, but let's talk about that later. And a terrifying and unprecedented statement from the Bank of England that claims a new artificial intelligence is just too dangerous to release. Do we need new laws, or would those laws destroy our economy? And
the people are speaking. The people are speaking. You better listen.
People are speaking, they claim. That's as an island erupts into protests over the cost of fuel. It seems, though, the campaign has now even spread to mainland Europe in France too. Is the EU in big trouble, and is it headed our way? Plus, Costa del Crime. Costa Coffee is the latest high street brand to hire bouncers. So you're going to need an ID for a cafe latte at some point. And
I'm thinking about it. I know what the job is. And I know what it requires.
oh my goodness, what is she thinking? Does she really think she's going to win? Let's just give her another go. Go on, Kamala, give it another go. And as I was saying, joining me this evening is my panel, the editorial director at Guido Fawkes, Adam Cherry, he's back, journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov, and journalist Linda Jubilee. And while you're here, what do you think is going on here? Can you see that yet? Little clips there. Perhaps we'll... Any guesses? No. All right, well, look, a huge couple of hours coming up for you. Your Saturday evening is just getting started, but first we're going to get your news with Lewis Mackenzie.
Thanks, Alex. Good evening. It's just after 9 o'clock. I'm Lewis Mackenzie, and here are your latest GB News headlines. Now, GB News presenter Eamon Holmes is recovering in hospital after suffering a stroke. He was taken ill last week and is now currently responding well to treatment. Eamon is Britain's longest-serving breakfast news presenter and currently host of GB News Breakfast alongside Ellie Costello. Everyone here at GB News wishes him a speedy recovery, and we look forward